This video will help you sleep and relax. But before we begin, I would like to know which city you're from and what time you're watching this. Now, subscribe to the channel, relax, and let's begin. I'm still shaking as I write this. Even though it happened 3 weeks ago, I can't sleep properly. I keep seeing his face in the window reflection. I keep feeling his fingers digging into my wrist under that table. It was supposed to be a fun day out with my nephew Jamie. He's only 3, but he's absolutely obsessed with football. My sister had gotten me tickets to the Rangers game in Glasgow as a birthday present, and I'd promised to take Jamie along. He'd been counting down the days, walking around in his little blue jersey that was way too big for him. The game itself was great. Rangers won 3-1, and Jamie was over the moon. He kept jumping up and down, clapping his little hands whenever the crowd cheered. The smile on his face made the whole trip worth it. I bought him a hot dog and some fizzy juice, against my sister's strict instructions, and he got his face painted with the team colors. Perfect uncle points. After the match, we headed to Glasgow Queen Street Station to catch the 9:30 p.m. train back to Dundee. Jamie was completely worn out by this point. Football games are exhausting when you're 3 feet tall and watching your heroes play. He was practically falling asleep standing up while we waited on the platform. When the train arrived, I found us a table seat near the middle of the carriage. Jamie climbed up onto the seat beside me, put his head on my lap, and was out like a light within minutes. I smiled down at him, his face paint already smudged across his cheek and onto my jeans. The carriage was nearly empty. Just an elderly woman knitting something a few seats away, a young guy with headphones in reading a book on the opposite side, and a middle-aged man sitting diagonally across from us. I remember thinking how quiet it was compared to the roaring football stadium we'd just left. I must have been more tired than I realized because I dozed off myself at some point. I woke with a jolt when the ticket inspector came through. He checked my ticket and told me we were approaching Arbroath. I thanked him, still groggy, and then the realization hit me like a bucket of ice water. Arbroath. We were supposed to get off at Dundee. We'd missed our stop. I sat up straight, sudden panic coursing through me. I asked the inspector when the next stop was, and he told me we'd be in Montrose in about 20 minutes. My stomach dropped. We were headed all the way to Aberdeen on the last train of the night. "Is there a train back to Dundee tonight?" I asked, already knowing the answer. The inspector shook his head. "Last one's gone, I'm afraid. First one tomorrow's at 5:45 a.m. I thanked him, trying to hide how shaken I was. Jamie was still fast asleep, completely oblivious to the fact that his idiot uncle had just royally screwed up. I pulled out my phone to check Uber prices from Aberdeen to Dundee. My battery was at 15%. The quote came back at 97,000, money I definitely didn't have. I tried calling my sister, but it went straight to voicemail. I sent her a text explaining what had happened and that we'd have to figure something out in Aberdeen. Then I Googled cheap hotels near Aberdeen Station, hoping there'd be something I could afford for just one night. That's when I noticed him watching me. The middle-aged man sitting diagonally across the carriage was staring at me. Not just glancing, full-on staring. I could see his reflection in the dark train window. Our eyes met in the glass, and instead of looking away like a normal person would, he smiled. Not a friendly smile. Something was off about it. I focused back on my phone, trying to ignore the creeping feeling along my spine. I found a hostel about a mile from the station that had beds for $25 each. Not ideal with a 3-year-old, but it would have to do. I was booking it when I heard the man speak. "Like sardines, aren't we?" I looked up, confused. The carriage was practically empty, 5 people in a space designed for 50 wasn't exactly sardine-like. "Sorry," I said, not wanting to engage, but also thrown off by the bizarre comment. "On these trains, packed in like sardines." He gestured around at the empty seats. His accent was strange, not Scottish, not quite English either. Something foreign underneath it all. "Right," I said, offering a tight smile before looking back at my phone. "Where you headed?" he asked, not taking the hint. "Aberdeen," I answered shortly. "Ah, same as me. Live there, do you?" "No, just visiting." I didn't want to tell him we'd missed our stop. Something in my gut told me not to show vulnerability. "With your boy?" He nodded toward Jamie. "My nephew," I corrected, instinctively placing a protective hand on Jamie's shoulder. He smiled again, that same unsettling smile. "Sweet lad." I nodded and went back to my phone, making it clear I wasn't interested in talking. I tried to focus on finalizing the hostel booking, but I could still feel his eyes on me. When I looked up at the window again, he was still staring, not even trying to hide it now. My phone battery dropped to 10%, and a warning appeared. I put it away, deciding to save the last bit of power for when we reached Aberdeen. I'd need the map to find the hostel. When I looked up again, the man was gone from his seat. I felt a momentary relief until I realized he had moved to sit directly across from me at our table. My heart rate instantly doubled. "Don't mind, do I?" he said, though he'd already sat down. "Gets a bit lonely sitting over there." Up close, I could see him better. He was maybe in his 50s, with graying hair and the kind of face that's instantly forgettable in a crowd, but terrifying when it's focused entirely on you. He wore a dark jacket that looked expensive but worn, and his hands were oddly clean, like hospital clean. "Actually, my nephew's sleeping, so—" I trailed off, hoping he'd take the hint. Poor wee man. Been a long day for him, has it? He spoke louder than necessary, and I found myself shushing him, worried he'd wake Jamie. That was my first mistake. Engaging. "Yes," I whispered. "Football game in Glasgow." "Rangers or Celtic?" he asked, his voice still too loud. "Rangers." "Good lad." He reached across as if to touch Jamie's head. I shifted, blocking his hand with my arm. "He's pretty tired," I said firmly. The man withdrew his hand, but his smile didn't falter. "Were you staying in Aberdeen, then?" That cold feeling in my gut intensified. "With friends," I lied. "Friends?" He raised an eyebrow. "Thought you said you were just visiting." "Shit. Yes, visiting friends. At this time of night, with a wee one?" He clicked his tongue. "That's not very considerate of you." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just shrugged and looked out the window. The train was passing through darkness, small towns occasionally lighting up the night before disappearing again. I could see the man's reflection watching me, still smiling. "You missed your stop, didn't you?" he said suddenly. I froze. "What?" "I heard you with the ticket man. You missed Dundee." He leaned forward. "No trains back tonight." I swallowed hard. "We'll manage. Hotels will be expensive, if you can even find one with vacancy at this hour." He paused, studying my face. "You know, I live 5 minutes from the station. Nice big place. Spare room going unused." My skin crawled. "That's very kind, but we'll be fine." "I insist," he said, his tone shifting slightly. "It's no trouble. I couldn't live with myself knowing a young man and his wee nephew were wandering Aberdeen at midnight with nowhere to go." "Really, we have arrangements," I said, more firmly this time. "No, you don't." His smile was gone now. "You missed your stop, your phone's dying, and you're panicking." How did he know about my phone? I hadn't mentioned it. Had he been watching me that closely? "I'm not offering twice," he said, his voice lower now. It would be stupid to refuse, dangerous even, wandering Aberdeen at night, not a safe city after dark. The threat was thinly veiled. I felt sick. Jamie stirred in his sleep, and I put my arm around him protectively. I need to use the toilet, I said suddenly, planning to take Jamie with me and find the conductor or another passenger, anyone who could help. I started to get up, gently trying to lift Jamie without waking him too suddenly, but then I felt it. Under the table, out of sight from anyone else in the carriage, the man's hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. His grip was like iron, his fingers digging into my skin so hard I knew they'd leave bruises. "You're not going anywhere," he said quietly, his voice completely different now, cold, hard. "You're staying with me." I tried to pull away, but his grip only tightened. "Let go of me," I hissed, trying not to wake Jamie or draw attention that might make the situation worse. "Listen carefully," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're going to act natural for the rest of this journey. When we get to Aberdeen, you're going to come with me to my home. You and the boy. If you try anything stupid, if you say anything to anyone, I'll make sure you regret it. Do you understand?" My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might burst out of my chest. I nodded, unable to speak. "Good," he said, his public smile returning, while his grip on my wrist remained vice-like under the table. "Now, tell me about your day at the football. Act natural." For the next 40 minutes, I lived through what I can only describe as psychological torture. I made small talk about the football match, my voice shaking, while this stranger held on to me under the table, occasionally squeezing harder when my responses weren't quick enough or enthusiastic enough for his liking. All the while, Jamie slept against me, completely unaware of the nightmare unfolding. I kept glancing around the carriage, desperate for help. The elderly woman had fallen asleep, her knitting in her lap. The young guy with headphones was still reading, seemingly in his own world. I tried to catch his eye, but he never looked up. As the train announcement indicated we were approaching Aberdeen, the man leaned in closer. "When we get off, you'll hold my hand. You'll wake the boy and tell him we're staying at this nice man's house tonight. If you try anything, if you say anything to alarm anyone, I'll make sure neither of you makes it home. Do you understand?" I nodded, feeling tears threatening to spill. I had never been so scared in my life. The train began to slow as we pulled into Aberdeen Station. The man released my wrist but kept his eyes fixed on me, daring me to run. I gently woke Jamie, my hands trembling as I gathered our things. "Uncle Danny," Jamie mumbled, rubbing his eyes. "Are we home?" Before I could answer, the man cut in. "Not yet, wee man. You're coming to stay at my house tonight. Won't that be fun?" Jamie looked confused, staring at this stranger. I opened my mouth, not sure what I was going to say, when the train doors opened and everything happened at once. 2 police officers rushed onto our carriage. Without warning, they tackled the man to the ground. He screamed and fought as they handcuffed him, his face transformed into something inhuman with rage. I stood frozen, Jamie crying in confusion beside me, as a 3rd officer approached us. "Are you Daniel Fletcher?" she asked. I nodded, still unable to process what was happening. "You're safe now," she said. "We received a text from another passenger who was concerned about your welfare." I looked over to see the young guy with headphones standing nearby, his book closed. He gave me a small nod. "There are posters all over the train with the British Transport Police contact number," he explained. I texted them what was happening. I could see his reflection in the window, too. I broke down then, the fear and relief overwhelming me. I collapsed into a seat, pulling Jamie close as he cried in confusion. The officers took statements from me and the young man, while other officers removed the struggling man from the train. I learned later that the man was known to the police. He had previous convictions for violent offenses, including abduction. They found duct tape, zip ties, and a knife in his jacket. I can't bring myself to think about what would have happened if we'd gone with him. The police arranged for us to be driven back to Dundee that night. I held Jamie the entire way, watching him sleep as I tried to process how close we'd come to something unimaginable. It's been 3 weeks, and I still can't sleep properly. I flinch when strangers sit near me on public transport. I check the locks on my doors multiple times each night. I will never, ever travel alone at night again, and I will never let my guard down in public. The young man who texted the police saved our lives that night. He noticed when no one else did. I don't know his name. In the chaos, I never got it. But I owe him everything. So if you're reading this and you were on that last train to Aberdeen 3 weeks ago, thank you. And to everyone else, please stay aware of your surroundings. Notice when something feels wrong. Trust your instincts. And if you see someone who might be in trouble, don't just look away. Because sometimes the monster isn't hiding under the bed or in the closet. Sometimes he's sitting across from you on an empty train, talking about sardines and offering you a place to stay. I still get this knot in my stomach whenever I think about it. It's been almost a year, but I can remember everything from that day like it just happened. The smells, the sounds, the pure fear that made my legs feel like jelly. I was 12, just a normal kid who thought bad things only happened to other people. It was a Thursday in November. The days were getting shorter, and Zagreb was already dark by the time school finished. I attended this private school that prided itself on academics, which meant we often stayed late for extra lessons. That particular day, we had chemistry tutoring until 8:30 p.m. I was tired and looking forward to getting home, but I never imagined my regular commute would turn into this. I'd made this journey 100 times before. My parents had drilled the route into me when I first started. Take the bus from school to the main street, transfer to tram number 2, get off at the park, and walk the last 5 minutes to our apartment building. Simple. I even had friends who took the same route for part of the way. My mom always said there was safety in numbers. That evening, Petra, Ivana, and I left school together. We were talking about this test we had coming up while we waited at the bus stop. It was cold, and I remember wishing I'd worn my thicker jacket instead of my purple hoodie. The bus arrived around 8:45 p.m., the 34 line. We got on, and I made a decision I still kick myself about. I chose to sit near the front of the bus in one of those forward-facing seats. Petra and Ivana sat a few rows back. I pulled out this book I was reading, some young adult novel about dragons, and settled in for the 20-minute ride. About 5 minutes in, I felt something. Have you ever had that feeling where the hairs on your neck stand up, like someone's watching you? I glanced up and caught the reflection in the window. Behind me sat this man, probably in his 40s, with a balding head and these small, watery eyes that were fixed right on me. Not just glancing, but staring. He wore a gray jacket that looked like it hadn't been washed in weeks, and he had this strange stain on his collar. Something about him made my stomach turn immediately. I tried to focus on my book, but I could feel his eyes boring into me. Every time I looked up, he was still staring. Not reading, not on his phone, just watching me. I started feeling really uncomfortable, so I texted Petra. "Creepy guy behind me keeps staring." She texted back, "Ignore him, probably just weird." Our stop was coming up, so I put my book away and got ready to stand. When the bus stopped, I practically jumped up. Petra and Ivana followed me off the bus, and we started walking toward the tram station about a block away. I didn't think to look behind us until Ivana nudged me and whispered, "That guy from the bus is following us." My heart started beating faster. I glanced back and saw him, keeping maybe 15 meters behind us, hands in his pockets, eyes still locked on me. I told myself it was a coincidence. Zagreb isn't that big, and lots of people transfer from that bus to the trams. At the tram station, Ivana was going in a different direction. She gave us a quick hug goodbye, and suddenly it was just Petra and me. The man positioned himself at the other end of the platform, pretending to read the schedule, but I could see him watching us from the corner of his eye. When tram number 2 arrived, I felt a little better. The tram was crowded with people heading home from late shifts, and Petra and I found seats in the middle section. I relaxed a little, thinking we'd lost him in the crowd, until I saw him board through the rear doors. My mouth went dry when he made his way toward us and stood at the handrail just a few feet away. I whispered to Petra, "He's still following us." She looked nervous now, too. "Are you sure? Maybe he just needs to go the same way." "He keeps staring at me, not like a normal person," I said. Petra suggested calling my mom, but I didn't want to worry her. My stop was just a few minutes away, and Petra lived 3 stops after mine. I started getting really anxious about getting off alone. When my stop approached, I hesitated. Should I stay on with Petra? But then I'd have to ride all the way back alone after dropping her off. Petra offered to get off with me and have her dad pick her up from my place, but I didn't want to inconvenience her family. "I'll be fine," I told her. "It's just a short walk through the park. There are usually people around." As the tram slowed at my stop, I saw the man move toward the doors. He got off first, and to my relief, he started walking in the opposite direction of my apartment, toward the other side of the park. I felt silly for being so paranoid. He was just some random commuter. I said goodbye to Petra, promising to text her when I got home. The park was dimly lit, but had these beautiful old lamps along the main path. This was normally my favorite part of the journey, a little peaceful stretch before getting home. That night, it felt endless. I was about halfway through the park when I heard footsteps behind me. Quick, heavy steps. I glanced back and nearly stopped breathing. It was him. He must have circled around when I wasn't looking. He was maybe 30 feet behind me and walking faster now. I didn't want to run and trigger some kind of chase instinct, so I just walked faster, clutching my phone and pulling up my mom's number without looking down. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The exit to the park seemed miles away. When I finally reached the street, I chanced another look back. He was closer now, maybe 15 feet behind. I abandoned any pretense of casualness and started power walking toward my apartment building, which was just around the corner in this small alley off the main street. I turned into the alley and heard his pace quicken. Before I could break into a run, he called out, "Hey, little girl, excuse me." His voice made my skin crawl. I didn't answer and walked faster. "You're Tomislav's daughter, right? I work with your father." My dad's name is Ivan, not Tomislav. That's when I knew for certain this wasn't some misunderstanding. I started running. Our building has this security door where you need to buzz an apartment or use a key. I fumbled with my key, my hands shaking so badly I could barely aim for the lock. I could smell him behind me now, this awful mix of body odor and something sour like old alcohol. "Just wait a second," he said, his voice suddenly right behind me. "I need to talk to you about your father. He asked me to pick you up." The door finally clicked open, and I slipped inside, trying to close it quickly behind me, but he grabbed it before it could shut. His fingers were dirty, with yellowish nails. I let go of the door and sprinted for the stairs, not waiting for the elevator. Our apartment was on the 3rd floor. I could hear him behind me, taking the stairs 2 at a time. I was screaming now, yelling, "Mom! Mom!" at the top of my lungs as I raced up the flights. I reached our floor and ran down the hallway, still screaming. Just as I got to our door, it swung open. My mom stood there in her bathrobe, looking confused and then horrified as she saw my face, and the man who was now just half a flight of stairs below, slowing down when he saw her. "Mila, what's happening?" she shouted, pulling me inside. The man froze on the stairs. My mom pushed me behind her and stepped into the hallway. "Who are you? What do you want with my daughter?" she yelled, her voice echoing in the stairwell. The man suddenly changed his demeanor completely. He mumbled something about having the wrong building, turned around, and hurried back down the stairs. My mom quickly pulled me inside and locked the door, then called the police. I collapsed on the floor, shaking uncontrollably. I couldn't stop crying. My mom held me tight, trying to calm me down while talking to the police. They said they'd send someone right away. 2 officers arrived about 15 minutes later. They took my statement, asking me to describe everything about the man, his clothes, his face, any distinctive features. I told them about the gray jacket, the balding head, the stain on his collar, his yellowish fingernails. They searched the area, but couldn't find him. The next few days were a blur. The police reviewed security footage from the tram and bus stations, but said the angles were bad and the lighting too poor for a clear identification. They checked with my school to see if anyone suspicious had been hanging around, but nothing came up. For 2 weeks after that, I couldn't bring myself to take public transportation. My mom drove me to and from school, rearranging her work schedule to make it happen. I had nightmares almost every night, dreams where I was running up endless stairs with that man right behind me, his breath on my neck. My parents tried to help. They enrolled me in a self-defense class. They bought me a personal alarm to carry. My dad started picking me up from school whenever he could, but nothing really made the fear go away. Then, almost exactly 2 weeks after it happened, we were watching the evening news when his face appeared on the screen. I remember gasping so loudly my dad spilled his coffee. The reporter was talking about an arrest. A man had been caught trying to lure another girl, about my age, into his car near a different school across the city. It was him. Same watery eyes, same balding head. The report said his name was Darko something, and he had a record of similar attempts in other cities. They found rope, duct tape, and sedatives in his car. I burst into tears right there on the couch, not from fear this time, but from relief. The police came back the next day to take another statement from me, and I identified him from a photo lineup. They told us later that my description had helped connect him to several other incidents. Gradually, I started returning to my normal routine. I still took the same bus and tram, but never alone anymore. My mom arranged a carpool with other parents for the late study days, and I became hyper-aware of my surroundings. No more reading on public transportation, no more headphones, always sitting near the driver. It's been almost a year now. Sometimes I can go days without thinking about it. Other times, like when I'm alone in a public place and feel someone looking at me, it all comes rushing back. The smell of his unwashed clothes, the sound of his footsteps on the stairs, the desperate feeling of my key not working fast enough in the lock. I don't know what would have happened if my mom hadn't been home that night, or if I'd been just a little slower on the stairs. I try not to think about it, but sometimes my mind goes there anyway. The police told us he's in prison now and will be for a long time. That helps, but it doesn't erase that day from my memory. I don't think anything ever will. I'm 13 now, and I understand that the world can be dangerous in ways I never imagined before. But I also learned that I'm stronger than I thought, that when it really matters, I can run fast, think quickly, and fight back. Still, every time I see a balding man in a gray jacket, my heart skips a beat. And I don't think I'll ever be able to walk through that park again without looking over my shoulder. I never thought something like this would happen to me. I'm a pretty normal person living a pretty normal life. I've been with my boyfriend for 3 years. I work at a grocery store, and I live with my mom, her fiancé, Tom, and my older sister in a small trailer park on the outskirts of town. It's not fancy, but it's home. Most neighbors keep to themselves here, which is one of the things I actually like about living here. Everyone respects each other's space. That all changed when Chris moved in next door about 6 months ago. At first, it seemed totally normal. New guy moves in, keeps to himself. I didn't really pay much attention. Tom, my mom's fiancé, started hanging out with him occasionally. They'd have a beer together on Chris's tiny porch sometimes. Tom said he seemed like an okay guy, just trying to get back on his feet after some troubles. I didn't think much of it at the time. Then my sister Jen started noticing things. Whenever she'd walk out to her car for work in the morning, Chris would suddenly appear outside his trailer, like within seconds. At first we laughed it off as coincidence, but it kept happening, too many times to be random. "Rose, I swear he watches for me through the window," Jen told me one night. "I can feel his eyes on me before I even close the car door. It's creeping me out." I started paying attention after that. Sure enough, I noticed the curtain in his front window would move whenever any of us came outside. But he seemed particularly interested when I was around. I'd feel this weird sensation on the back of my neck, and when I turned, I'd catch the curtain falling back into place. About a month after Chris moved in, I got a friend request on Facebook from someone I didn't recognize. The profile picture was just some generic graphic, not a face. The name was Christopher M. I ignored it at first. I get random requests sometimes. Then another request came the next day. Same person. I checked the profile and saw it was totally new, created that week with barely any information, no mutual friends, nothing to indicate how this person found me. That same afternoon, Tom mentioned casually over dinner, "Oh, Chris next door was asking about you, Rose, wondering if you were on Facebook." My stomach dropped. "What did you tell him?" "Just that I thought you were." "Why? What's wrong?" Tom looked confused. "Nothing," I lied. I didn't want to sound paranoid. But later that night, I got a third friend request from the same profile. This time, I clicked on it to see more. What I found made me feel sick. This guy had gone through hundreds of profiles to find me. I have a pretty common name, Rose Williams, and my profile is pretty locked down. The only way he would have found me is by searching through endless Rose Williamses until he found one that matched where I lived. Against my better judgment, I accepted the request. I thought maybe if I could see what he posted, I'd know if I needed to be worried. Big mistake. Within minutes, literally minutes, he messaged me. "Hey, sexy, finally found you." I didn't respond. My boyfriend Ryan was sitting right next to me, and I showed him the message. "That's the new neighbor? What a creep," Ryan said, looking disgusted. Then more messages came. "I see you out there sometimes. You're sexy as hell." You should come over sometime when everyone's asleep. I know a spot in the woods behind the park where nobody would bother us. My profile clearly shows I'm in a relationship. My cover photo is literally me and Ryan. Every other post mentions him, but Chris completely ignored that fact and kept messaging me increasingly inappropriate things. I showed my mom the messages, hoping she'd be as freaked out as I was. Instead, she just looked worried in a different way. Rose, just be polite but distant, okay? Don't block him or anything drastic. What? Why not? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That's when my mom and Tom finally told me what they'd been keeping from me. Chris hadn't just had troubles. He'd been in prison, recently, for breaking and entering arson, and this is the part that made me feel like I couldn't breathe, manslaughter. He had stabbed another inmate. We didn't want to scare you, my mom explained. Tom found out from one of his friends who works at the prison. Chris was just released 3 months ago. And you're telling me not to block him? I was almost shouting at this point. If you block him, he might take it as a rejection, and he lives right next door, Rose, my mom said, lowering her voice. We need to be careful here. That's when Jen chimed in with the worst news of all. I saw him cutting through our yard yesterday. Like right by your bedroom window, Rose. When I asked what he was doing, he said he was looking for you. I felt violently ill. This convicted violent offender was looking for me, messaging me sexually explicit things, and apparently watching my movements from his window. And I was supposed to just be polite but distant? For the next few weeks, I lived in constant anxiety. I kept the blinds closed at all times. I had Ryan drive me to and from work, even though it was out of his way. I stopped going outside alone, even just to get the mail. Every time I saw Chris's truck in his driveway, I'd have this rush of fear through my body. The messages continued. Why do you ignore me? I know you get these messages. Is it that boyfriend? He doesn't have to know. I could make you so happy, Rose. I'd respond with the most boring, generic answers possible. I'm very busy with work. I'm not interested. I have a boyfriend. Please stop messaging me this way. Nothing discouraged him. If anything, my responses seemed to excite him more, like he'd managed to get a reaction. Then, about 2 months into this nightmare, something happened that made everything even more terrifying. It was around 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was in my room trying to distract myself with a show on Netflix when I heard shouting next door. Really violent shouting. A woman's voice I'd never heard before was screaming at Chris, calling him every name in the book. You think I don't know? You think I'm stupid? She was yelling. I couldn't make out Chris's responses, but they sounded angry, defensive. Then I heard a door slam and an engine start. Chris's truck peeled out of the driveway so fast the tires squealed. The woman continued screaming, now out in the yard. I peeked through my blinds and saw her, a short woman with long dark hair, pacing back and forth in his yard, talking angrily on a phone. About 20 minutes later, Chris's truck came racing back into the driveway. The woman started screaming again, and this time I heard her clearly. Get away from me! Don't you touch me! Then there was a crash, like something being thrown. Mom called 911, and we all huddled in the living room, listening to the chaos next door. The police came pretty quickly. We watched through the blinds as they separated Chris and the woman, talking to them individually. After about an hour, things calmed down, and the police left. But the woman stayed. The next day, Tom, who apparently couldn't help being friendly even with creeps, went over to check on Chris. When he came back, he had the full story, and it was worse than I could have imagined. The woman was Melissa, the mother of Chris's 2 children. They hadn't been together for years, but she still kept tabs on him because of the kids. She had discovered that not only was Chris messaging me, and who knows how many other women, but he was also seeing at least 3 different women simultaneously, none of whom knew about each other. When Melissa confronted him, he tried to take her car keys and steal her vehicle. That's what the fight was about. But here's the most chilling part. While Tom was over there, Chris had the nerve to ask about me. How's Rose doing? She's been ignoring my messages. Maybe I should go check on her. Tom, to his credit, finally realized how serious this was. I told him to leave you alone, he told me. I said you weren't interested, and he needed to back off. That night, I noticed Chris watching our trailer more intently than ever. The curtain barely moved now. He wasn't even trying to hide it, just staring openly. I couldn't sleep at all. The next day, Melissa came to our door while Chris was at work. She apologized for the disturbance and then lowered her voice. Listen, I don't know if you know what he did to get locked up, but he's dangerous. He has fixations on women. It doesn't end well. I've been trying to get him away from my kids for years. She explained that she was evicting him from the trailer, which she actually owned. He'd be gone within the week. True to her word, 3 days later, a moving truck showed up. Chris loaded his few belongings while glaring at our trailer the entire time. Before he left, he walked to the edge of our yard and just stood there, staring at my bedroom window. He stayed there for almost 20 minutes before Melissa started honking the horn of the moving truck. As they drove away, I felt this overwhelming mix of relief and lingering fear. He was gone, but he knew where I lived. He knew my name, my workplace, my social media, and worst of all, he had this fixation on me that made no sense, but clearly wasn't going away just because he'd moved. I blocked him on every platform I could think of. I changed my routines, my routes to work, even dyed my hair a different color. For weeks I jumped at every noise, convinced he was coming back. It's been about 2 months now since he left. I haven't heard from him directly, but last week, Ryan spotted a truck that looked like Chris's parked near my work when he came to pick me up. By the time we drove around the block to check, it was gone. I still don't feel safe. I keep thinking about those messages, his eyes watching me, the way he methodically searched for me online. He spent hours searching for me, someone he barely knew, someone who had shown no interest in him whatsoever. For months, I was living next door to a violent offender who had fixated on me for no reason I can understand. I had to smile politely when I saw him, knowing he'd been in my yard, looking into my window, fantasizing about getting me alone somewhere no one could bother us. I check the locks 3 times before I go to bed. I look over my shoulder constantly. I can't shake the feeling that he's still watching me somehow, waiting for his chance. The scariest part of all of this? If Melissa hadn't shown up that night and exposed him, if she hadn't evicted him, I'd still be living next door to him. My mom and Tom would still be telling me to be polite but distant, while this man with a history of violence calculated ways to get to me. I keep wondering how many other women have been in my position, living in fear of someone who's supposed to be turning their life around, expected to be nice and non-confrontational, even while every instinct screams danger. Never again will I ignore those instincts, and I will never, ever accept a friend request from someone I don't know. I still can't sleep with my curtains open. It's been 15 years, but some habits become survival instincts that never go away. I thought I was finally ready to get this all out. Maybe someone else has gone through something similar and can make sense of it, because I never could. It all started when I was around 10. That's my earliest memory of noticing Nick anyway. He lived in the house directly across from ours on Sycamore Street. Not a particularly remarkable guy at first glance. Just a skinny old man with patchy gray hair and this scraggly beard that always looked like he trimmed it with garden shears while drunk. He'd sit in his garage with the door open, just watching our house, for hours, every single day. My mom told me years later that Nick had shown up literally days after I was born, just knocked on our door out of the blue and asked if he could hold me. A complete stranger. My dad wasn't home, and Mom was freaked out but didn't want to seem rude. Classic 90s suburban politeness. So she let him look at me while she held me, but refused to hand me over. Thank God for that small moment of motherly instinct. Nick apparently just nodded, said I was perfect, and left. I didn't know any of this backstory as a kid. All I knew was that this old guy was always watching me. Not in the way adults sometimes watch neighborhood kids playing, keeping an eye out to make sure no one gets hurt. This was different. He watched me specifically. If I was outside with friends, his eyes followed only me. If I walked to the bus stop, he'd suddenly need to check his mailbox. If I was walking our dog after school, he'd materialize in his driveway. What really got to me was that he was so consistent. Every single morning before school, he'd be in his garage, pretending to tinker with something. Every afternoon when I got home, same thing. I started to notice him during random times at night, too. I could see his garage from my bedroom window, and sometimes I'd wake up at like 3 a.m. and see him just sitting there, in the dark, looking toward our house. My parents noticed but didn't seem that concerned at first. "Oh, he's just a lonely old man," my mom would say. "He probably misses having grandkids around." But they didn't see what I saw. They didn't feel those eyes boring into me. The turning point came on my 13th birthday. I had a few friends over for a sleepover, and we were setting up a blanket fort in the living room. Our front curtains were open because we'd been waiting for the pizza delivery guy. I glanced outside, and there was Nick, standing at the edge of our front yard in the fading evening light, just staring at our house. My friend Amber noticed me freeze up. "What's wrong?" "That's the weird guy I told you about," I whispered. We all crowded around the window, and then Nick did something he'd never done before. He waved directly at me and called out, "Happy birthday, Rosie." I felt like someone had dumped ice water down my spine. No one called me Rosie, except my grandfather who lived 3 states away. Not my parents, not my friends at school. No one. I'd never told Nick my name at all, let alone my nickname. My mom had come into the room and heard him. She frowned and opened the front door. "Excuse me," she called out. "How do you know my daughter's name?" Nick just smiled this weird, vacant smile. "She told me herself." "No, I didn't," I said, stepping behind my mom. "I've never talked to you." He just kept smiling. "Sure you did, Rosie. We talk all the time." Then he shuffled back across the street. That night, I made sure every curtain in the house was closed tight. My friends thought it was creepy, but also a little exciting, like we were in a scary movie. But it wasn't exciting for me. I barely slept a wink, convinced I could hear footsteps on our porch or see shadows moving under my bedroom door. The next morning there was a small box of chocolates on our front porch with a note. "For Rosie, happy 13th. It wasn't signed, but we all knew who it was from. Later that afternoon, I saw him watching me from his garage again, but this time when he waved, I noticed his other hand was down the front of his pants. I ran inside and threw up in the bathroom. That was when I finally told my dad everything. The constant watching, the name he shouldn't have known, the chocolates. and what I'd just seen. I'd never seen my dad so angry. He marched across the street, and I watched from our living room window as he confronted Nick. I couldn't hear what was said, but there was a lot of finger-pointing, and my dad's face was bright red. The next day, Nick was gone, just like that. A few weeks later, a new family moved into his house, a young couple with a baby. I thought that was the end of it. I started to relax again, started sleeping better, until 2 years later, when I was 15. I was home alone after school one day when the doorbell rang. It was a woman I recognized from Nick's old house, the young mom who had moved in after he left. "Are you Rose Thompson?" she asked, holding an envelope. I nodded, confused. "This came for you in our mail," she said, handing it to me. "It's weird because it has our address, but your name. Do you know anyone who might have gotten confused?" The envelope had my full name written on it in unfamiliar handwriting. I thanked her and closed the door, staring at it. Something felt wrong, very wrong. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single piece of paper with 2 words written in bright red ink. "Love you." The handwriting was shaky, like an old person's, like Nick's. Red ink. My favorite color was red. I had red sheets, red notebooks, red everything. How could he have known that? I'd never spoken to him. Never. I dropped the note like it had burned me and ran to lock all the doors and windows. Then I called my mom at work, sobbing. We never figured out where Nick went or how he knew to send that letter to his old address. We filed a police report, but they said there wasn't much they could do since there was no direct threat. We installed better locks and a security system. But here's the thing that still haunts me. How much did Nick know about me? My name, my nickname that only my grandfather used, my favorite color. What else? How long had he been watching me before I even noticed him? What did "we talk all the time" mean? The scariest part is that I still don't know if he's out there somewhere, watching me. Sometimes when I'm walking to my car after a late shift, I get this feeling on the back of my neck like someone's eyes are on me. I'll spin around, heart pounding, but there's never anyone there. At least, no one I can see. Maybe the creepiest thing is realizing that as a kid, I thought Nick was ancient, like Grandpa Old. Looking back now, he was probably only in his 50s or 60s, which means he could still be alive out there. Still thinking about Rosie. I've moved 4 times since high school, always to busy apartment buildings with secure entrances. I never use my real name on social media. I check my back seat before getting into my car every single time, and I absolutely never, ever sleep with my curtains open. Because some part of me is still that 10-year-old girl watching an old man watch me from across the street, knowing that something isn't right, but not understanding just how wrong it really is. The most terrifying realization came years later when I was looking through old family photos with my mom. There was a picture of me at maybe 2 years old, sitting on a swing at the park near our old house. In the background, barely visible on a bench, was a skinny man with patchy gray hair, just sitting there, watching. He was there all along, before I even knew to be afraid. I never thought I'd be the kind of person posting about something like this, but honestly, it's been weeks, and I still can't stop thinking about what happened. I don't have anyone who really gets why I'm so freaked out about it, so I figured I'd share it here where maybe someone will understand. I work in downtown Seattle at a marketing firm. Nothing fancy, just your typical office job with the usual corporate BS. About 3 weeks ago, I had to stay late to finish some client presentations that were due the next morning. I'm usually out by 6, but that night I didn't leave until almost 10 p.m. I was already annoyed about working late. But whatever, that's life. Our office building is in a decent area, and I live about a mile and a half away. I usually just walk home. Parking downtown is insanely expensive, and the bus schedule gets spotty after 9. I've made this walk hundreds of times without any issues. I'm a 35-year-old guy, 6'1", and I've always felt relatively safe walking around the city, even at night. That night was unusually quiet. It had rained earlier, so the streets were still wet, reflecting the streetlights and neon signs from the bars and restaurants. Most places were winding down for the night. I remember feeling tired, but also kind of enjoying the peaceful walk after being cooped up in the office all day. I was about halfway home when I first noticed him. I've always been pretty aware of my surroundings. Growing up in a city, you develop that sixth sense. I had taken one of my usual shortcuts down a side street past this row of closed boutique shops when I felt something was off. I glanced back casually, trying not to be obvious about it. There was a man walking behind me, maybe 20 feet back. Nothing unusual about that itself, but something about him immediately made me uncomfortable. He was average height, wearing dark clothes, and a baseball cap pulled low. I couldn't see his face clearly under the cap brim, but it wasn't his appearance that bothered me. It was how he was moving. He wasn't just walking, he was walking exactly like I was walking. When I slowed down a bit, pretending to check my phone, he slowed down too. When I picked up my pace again, so did he. The distance between us stayed exactly the same. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe he was just heading in the same direction. Maybe I was jumpy from working late. But that feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. I decided to test it. I made a deliberate turn onto Maple Street, which wasn't my usual route home. It's a quieter residential street with fewer street lights and basically no reason to go down unless you live there. Sure enough, baseball cap guy turned too. My heart started beating faster. I couldn't convince myself this was coincidence anymore. This guy was following me. I picked up my pace, not running yet, but walking quickly. He matched me step for step, still maintaining that same distance. Not close enough to grab me, but close enough to keep me in sight. I took another turn, this time onto Pike, where there would be more people. He followed. I crossed to the other side of the street at the next intersection. Within seconds, he crossed too. Now, I was legitimately scared. This wasn't normal behavior. Nobody follows someone like this without bad intentions. I ran through my options. I could call the police, but what would I say? There's a guy walking behind me? He hadn't done anything technically illegal. I could call a friend, but none lived nearby. I had pepper spray in my bag, but I really didn't want things to escalate to that point. I spotted a 7-Eleven up ahead with its fluorescent lights humming against the darkness. I made a beeline for it, hoping the guy would keep walking past if I went inside. The electronic bell dinged as I pushed through the door, and I felt a momentary wave of relief. The cashier was a young guy, maybe college age, with AirPods in and his attention glued to his phone. He barely looked up when I entered. The store was empty except for us. I grabbed a Red Bull I didn't need and pretended to browse the snacks while trying to calm down. My hands were shaking. I kept glancing out the window to see if baseball cap guy had passed. He hadn't passed. He was standing directly across the street, staring at the store. At me. Even through the glass and the distance, I could feel his eyes locked on me. He wasn't moving, wasn't pretending to wait for someone or look at his phone, just standing there, watching. I couldn't see his face clearly, but I didn't need to. His stance said everything. I was trapped. If I left, he'd follow me. If I stayed, Eventually, the cashier would wonder why I was lingering so long. I considered telling the cashier what was happening, but something told me this kid wouldn't be much help. He seemed completely checked out. I was trying to figure out what to do when the bell on the door dinged again. I looked up, and my stomach dropped. Baseball cap guy was inside the store. He didn't look at me directly. He walked to the drink section, but I could tell he was watching me from the corner of his eye. Up close, I could see he was probably in his 40s, with a thin face and patchy stubble. He was wearing a dark windbreaker that seemed too warm for the weather. Nothing about him looked particularly threatening, and that somehow made it worse. He looked like anyone you'd pass on the street and never notice. I quickly went to the register, fumbling with my wallet while keeping my eye on him. The cashier rang up my Red Bull with agonizing slowness, still half-focused on his phone. "Everything okay, man?" the cashier finally asked, probably noticing how I kept looking over my shoulder. "Yeah, fine," I said, not wanting to make a scene. What if I was overreacting? What if this guy was just some normal dude buying a late-night snack? But that didn't explain why he'd followed me for blocks, matching my every move. I paid and hurried out, immediately picking up my pace once I hit the sidewalk. I didn't run. Something told me running would trigger a chase. Instead, I walked as fast as I could without breaking into a jog. I took a right at the next corner, then another right, making a mental map of how to get home by a different route. I glanced back and didn't see him. For a minute, I thought maybe I'd lost him. Maybe this whole thing was in my head after all. Then I turned onto Jefferson Street, and my blood froze. Baseball cap guy was standing at the far end of the block. My block. Somehow, he'd gotten ahead of me. He was standing almost directly in front of the path I would need to take to reach my apartment building. This wasn't possible. There was no way he could have known where I lived. No way he could have beaten me here taking a normal route. He must have run through some alley or cut through a building to get ahead of me. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't random. This was calculated. I stopped dead in my tracks, my mind racing. Should I confront him? Call 911 now? Find another store to hide in? I was about to turn around when I noticed a group of people coming out of a bar nearby. 3 guys and 2 women laughing loudly, obviously on their way home from a night out. Without thinking too hard about it, I jogged up to them. "Hey, sorry to bother you," I said, trying to sound casual despite my racing heart. "Would you mind if I walked with you guys for a block? There's someone following me and it's freaking me out." They looked surprised but not unfriendly. One of the guys glanced back down the street. "That guy in the hat?" he asked. I nodded, not turning around to look. "Yeah, he's been behind me for like 20 minutes. Keeps following me wherever I go." The group exchanged looks. Then one of the women shrugged. "Sure, stay with us. We're heading toward Pike Place." I walked with them, immensely grateful, making small talk I don't even remember. I kept expecting baseball cap guy to follow, but when I finally got the courage to look back, he was gone, vanished. I thanked the group after about 2 blocks and took a very roundabout route home, constantly checking behind me. When I finally made it to my apartment building, I sprinted the last 50 feet to the door, fumbling with my key card. I half expected him to appear behind me, but the street remained empty. I got inside, made sure the door locked behind me, and took the elevator up to my floor, my heart still pounding. Inside my apartment, I locked the door, then checked that the windows were locked too, even though I'm on the 5th floor. I closed all the blinds. I was so amped up on adrenaline that I couldn't even sit down. I just kept pacing back and forth, replaying everything in my head. Had I imagined it? Had I blown some coincidence out of proportion? But no, the way he matched my pace, crossed the street when I did, came into the store, and then somehow knew to wait on my block. There was no innocent explanation for that. I barely slept that night. Every noise in the hallway made me tense up. I kept thinking about how he'd been waiting on my block. How had he known? Had he followed me before, on other nights, learning my route without me noticing? The thought made me sick. The next morning, I took an Uber to work, even though it was broad daylight. I changed my route home that evening, and the next evening, and the next. I haven't seen baseball cap guy again, but I can't shake the feeling that he's still out there, watching, waiting. It's been 3 weeks now, and I've started to doubt myself. Maybe it wasn't as sinister as it felt. Maybe there was some explanation I'm missing. But then I remember the deliberate way he moved, the calculated distance he maintained, how he somehow got ahead of me to wait on my block, and I know in my gut that whatever his intentions were, they weren't good. The worst part is that he didn't technically do anything wrong. He walked on a public street. He entered a public store. He stood on a public sidewalk. I have no proof that he meant me harm, but I absolutely know, that if I hadn't found that group to walk with, something bad would have happened that night. I still take different routes home. I've started carrying my pepper spray in my hand, not my bag. I look over my shoulder constantly. I've stopped working late. I take Ubers if it's after dark, but I can't stop thinking about it. Did he pick me randomly? Has he done this to other people? Was he planning to rob me, hurt me, or just scare me? And most frightening of all, does he know where I live now? I don't have answers to any of these questions, and I probably never will. All I know is that my sense of safety has been completely shattered. I feel watched all the time now, even when I'm alone in my own apartment. I've gone back and forth about filing a police report, but what would I say? A man walked behind me on a public street? It sounds ridiculous when I put it like that. But it wasn't ridiculous. It was methodical, deliberate, and terrifying. So I guess I'm sharing this as a reminder to trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't gone into that store, or if I hadn't found that group to walk with. I don't want to know. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night thinking I hear footsteps outside my door. I lie there in the dark, listening, wondering if baseball cap guy is out there waiting, figuring out his next move. And the truth is, I'll probably never know for sure. I still can't believe I'm writing this. My hands are shaking just thinking about it. I've started and deleted this post like 5 times already, but I need to get it out. Maybe it'll help someone else stay safe. Maybe it'll help me process what happened. I don't know. This happened 3 weeks ago, and I haven't been the same since. I live in Arlington, not far from AT&T Stadium where the Cowboys play. Always thought I was street smart enough, you know? I'm 24, barely 5'2", and yeah, I have pink hair that probably makes me stand out more than I should. I've always heard about human trafficking in the DFW area. It's on the news. People share those Facebook posts about suspicious people at gas stations. But it was always something that happened to other people, not to me. Never to me. I was riding my bike to this smoke shop I go to sometimes. It's about 3 miles from my apartment, and I usually take the same route. Part of it cuts through this neighborhood that's not the greatest, but it was the middle of the day, like 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. The sun was out. I had my headphones in, listening to that new album I'd been waiting for. I stopped at this crosswalk, waiting for the light. That's when I first saw them. This white van pulled up beside me, totally windowless except for the front. Two Hispanic guys inside, maybe in their 30s. The driver had this mustache and a baseball cap. The passenger was heavier, with a beard. At first, I thought it was just going to be the usual catcalling BS that happens when you're a woman existing in public. But what they said, it wasn't that. The passenger leaned out his window and said, "We're going to get you." The driver was laughing, and the passenger added, "You're next," with this excitement in his voice that made my stomach drop. I flipped them off. Probably stupid, but it was instinct. The light changed, and I pedaled away, thinking that was it. Just another pair of creeps being creeps. I kept riding, put it out of my mind, and focused on my music. About 15 minutes later, I was less than a block from the smoke shop. The area there is really isolated. Empty lots on one side, this abandoned house with a tall fence on the other. No businesses, no pedestrians, just nothing. My album had just ended, and I almost stopped to pick a new one on my phone, but something told me to keep going. That's when I felt it. That weird sensation on the back of your neck when something's wrong. I glanced to my right, and there was that same white van, just cruising slowly beside me. The engine revved like they wanted me to know they were there. I didn't look directly at them. I don't know why, but I pretended I didn't notice, while my heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Ahead of me was this brick wall that curves around with a big tree and an alley entrance. I realized what they were trying to do. They were speeding up, angling the van to pin me between their door and that wall. I had maybe 2 seconds to decide what to do. 2 seconds between being here, writing this, and something else. I didn't even think. My body just moved. I swerved left across the street, away from them. As I passed the front of the van, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. This small, cheap-looking magnetic sign for quality window repair, or some BS like that. It looked like something they'd slapped on as an afterthought. And I saw movement in the back of the van. Through the driver's window, I could see into the back a little, and someone was positioned by the side door, like they were waiting for me to get trapped so they could grab me off my bike and pull me in. When I crossed the street, they weren't expecting it. I heard scrambling inside the van, and then they gunned it, speeding off down the road. I didn't stop. I didn't even go to the smoke shop. I just turned around and took a different route home, checking behind me every 5 seconds. I realized later how perfect their plan was. My roommate was out of town for the week. I work from home. Nobody would have reported me missing for days. Days they could have used to get me somewhere else. Across the border, maybe. I don't know. I told my friend Carlos about it a few days later, still in shock. He used to live in El Paso and knows about cartel stuff. He got really quiet and said that's exactly how trafficking operations work. They spot a target, follow them to learn their routines, then grab them when they're isolated. He said the magnetic sign was probably to make the van look legitimate if anyone happened to see it. I filed a police report, but they just took the information and said they'd keep an eye out, like that means anything. I gave them the partial plate number I managed to remember, but I haven't heard anything since. I've changed everything about my routine now. I don't go anywhere alone. I've stopped wearing headphones outside. I carry pepper spray and a personal alarm. I've even thought about moving, but my lease isn't up for months, and I can't afford to break it. The thing that keeps me up at night isn't just what almost happened to me. It's thinking about how many women weren't as lucky as I was. How many didn't have that split-second instinct to swerve away. How many are just gone. I keep replaying those moments in my mind. If my music hadn't ended when it did, I might not have heard the van approaching. If I'd stopped to change songs, I would have been a stationary target. If I'd frozen for even a second when I realized what was happening, I wouldn't be here writing this. The whole thing probably lasted less than a minute. 1 minute that changed how I see everything. I used to feel safe in my city. Now I can't even walk to my car without checking under it, behind it, around it. I still don't know if they were specifically targeting me or if I was just in the wrong place. Had they been following me for days? Did they know my routine? Or was I just a random opportunity? Either way, they were organized. They had a plan. They'd done this before. When I'm trying to sleep, I can still hear the engine revving. I can still see the passenger's face when he said, "You're next." I can still feel that moment of pure terror when I realized what was happening. I'm writing this as a warning, I guess. This shit is real. It happens in broad daylight, in normal neighborhoods, to normal people. Trust your instincts. Be aware of your surroundings. Don't assume it can't happen to you. I never thought it would happen to me either, until it almost did. I've been trying to find information about similar incidents in my area, but there's nothing specific enough to connect. How many women have disappeared without anyone making the connection? How many vans with temporary magnetic signs are out there right now, looking for their next target? Every white van I see now makes my heart race. Every man who looks at me too long on the street becomes a potential threat. I hate living like this, but I don't know how to stop. The worst part is that if they got me, I probably would have just become another missing person flyer that people walk past without really seeing. Another statistic. Another unsolved case. My pink hair would have been the only distinguishing feature on a police report that eventually got filed away. I still ride my bike, but never alone and never with headphones. I've mapped out routes that stay in busy areas, even if they take longer. I've told everyone in my life to check in regularly, to never assume I'm just not answering my phone. I don't know what else to do except share this story. Maybe it'll help someone else recognize the danger before it's too late. Maybe someone else will swerve left when everything in them wants to freeze. It's been 3 weeks and I still don't feel safe. I don't know if I ever will again. Those men are still out there. That van is still out there. And next time, the person they target might not be as lucky as I was. Be careful out there, please. I've been debating whether to share this for months now. It was just one night, but it completely changed how I navigate the world. Even typing this makes my hands shake a little, but I need to put it out there, maybe as a warning, maybe just to process it. I moved to Seoul for my junior year abroad about 8 months ago. I was excited about everything, the food, the culture, the language immersion. After my boyfriend of 2 years broke up with me right before I left, over text, no less, I decided this was my chance to fully dive into Korean culture, including dating. After settling in for a few weeks, I downloaded this dating app that was popular with international students and locals. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just wanted to practice my Korean and experience dating in a different culture. That's when I matched with Tim, not his real name, obviously. His profile seemed normal enough. He said he was a grad student at a nearby university, interested in Western culture and wanting to practice English. His photos were kind of blurry, but showed a guy in business clothes who seemed put together. We chatted for about a week, and while there were some weird moments, like how he'd sometimes disappear mid-conversation, then reappear hours later, acting like nothing happened, I chalked it up to cultural differences, or maybe a language barrier. When he suggested meeting up, I was excited but cautious. I suggested a coffee shop near my campus. That's when the first real red flag appeared. He immediately pushed back, saying he wanted to pick me up at my dorm. I explained that I wasn't comfortable with that for a first date, and he got weirdly insistent. "It's safer if I come get you," he kept saying, even after I explained that meeting in public was actually the safer option. After some back and forth, he finally agreed to meet at this tea shop about a 10-minute walk from my dorm. I remember feeling relieved but also slightly on edge. I even texted my roommate the address and told her to expect a check-in text from me every hour. The day of our date arrived and he was late. Not just a few minutes, almost an hour late. I was about to leave when he finally showed up, breathing heavily like he'd been running. The first thing that struck me was how different he looked from his pictures. He was much smaller than I expected, maybe 5'6" compared to my 5'8", and he was wearing this weirdly formal outfit, a gray suit that seemed slightly too big for him, with a blue tie that was a little crooked. But it was what he said that really caught me off guard. He looked me up and down and said, "You're not as white as I thought you'd be." I was so stunned I couldn't even respond. I'm pretty pale. I'm of Scandinavian and Irish descent, with reddish blonde hair. Before I could say anything, he reached out and touched my hair, saying, "I wish your eyes were greener. Are you sure you're not mixed with something?" I should have left right then. I know that now. But in the moment, I was in a foreign country, trying to be open-minded, and I stupidly thought maybe it was just a cultural misunderstanding or poor translation. So I awkwardly laughed it off and suggested we go inside. At the tea shop, I started looking at the menu, but he immediately took it from me. "I know what you'll like," he said. "You don't need to choose." He ordered some herbal tea for me, without even asking what I wanted. When I tried to interject, he shushed me, actually put his finger to his lips and made a shh sound. The server looked uncomfortable but took the order. While we waited, I tried to make conversation. I asked about his studies, his family, basic first date stuff, but he deflected every question. "I'm mysterious," he said, smiling in a way that made my skin crawl. "Like in the movies, girls like mysterious men, right?" Then he leaned forward and whispered, "You remind me of someone from a movie. Has anyone ever told you that?" The tea arrived and it tasted weird, too sweet and with some flavor I couldn't identify. When I mentioned this, he seemed almost angry. "Drink it," he insisted. "It's expensive." I took a few more sips to be polite but left most of it. After about 30 minutes of stilted conversation where I learned absolutely nothing about him, he suggested we go for a walk around my campus. It was already getting dark, around 7:30 p.m., but there were still plenty of students around, so I agreed, thinking it might be easier to talk while walking. That's when things got truly uncomfortable. Every few minutes, he would suddenly grab me for a hug. Not a quick, friendly hug, but these long, tight hugs where he would press his face into my neck and breathe deeply. The first time, I was so startled I just froze. When he finally let go, I tried to casually create some distance, but he kept finding reasons to touch me, my arm, my hair, my waist. As we walked deeper into campus, away from the main buildings, I noticed there were fewer and fewer people around. I suggested turning back, but he took my hand and said, "Just a little farther. I want to show you something." He started asking really personal questions about where I lived back home, if I lived alone, how often my parents visited me in Seoul. When I tried to change the subject, he'd interrupt with more questions or just stare at me with this intense look. At one point, he asked if I was innocent or experienced, and I felt my entire body go cold. We approached this wooded area behind the science building. It's just a small patch of trees with a path running through it, nothing special. But when he suggested we go there, alarm bells started blaring in my head. It was completely dark by then, and the path wasn't lit. "I don't think that's a good idea," I said. "It's pretty dark. Let's head back to the main area." His entire demeanor changed in an instant. His face hardened, and he grabbed my arm, not just holding it, but gripping it hard enough that I could feel his fingernails. "We're going there," he said, no longer asking. "I can't let anyone see." That phrase, "I can't let anyone see," made my blood run cold. See what? What was he planning to do? I yanked my arm away hard enough that I stumbled backward a few steps. "I'm going back," I said, trying to sound firm despite the fact that my voice was shaking. "You can come with me or not." He stared at me for what felt like forever, this strange smile slowly spreading across his face. "You're not like I expected," he said finally. "But that's okay. We can do it here." Before I could process what that meant, he stepped forward. I thought he was going to try to kiss me, which would have been bad enough, but instead, he grabbed my shoulders, pulled me toward him, and bit my face. Not a playful nibble or something that could be misinterpreted as affection. He bit my cheek like a dog, hard enough that I felt his teeth sink in. I screamed and shoved him away with all my strength. He stumbled back, looking surprised, like he couldn't understand why I was upset. My cheek was throbbing, and when I touched it, my fingers came away with a small smear of blood. "What the fuck is wrong with you?" I yelled, backing away. He took a step toward me, and I just ran. I didn't look back to see if he was following. I just sprinted toward the lights of the main campus. There was a convenience store near the edge of campus that was always busy with students, and I ducked inside, breathing hard and fighting back tears. I hid in the back of the store for almost 20 minutes, shaking and checking my face in my phone camera. There was a visible bite mark, not deep enough to need stitches, but definitely red and starting to bruise. I couldn't believe what had happened. Who bites someone on a first date? Once I was sure he hadn't followed me, I texted my roommate to meet me, and we walked back to the dorm together. I blocked Tim on the dating app immediately and reported his profile. That night, I called my mom despite the time difference. I couldn't sleep, and I needed to talk to someone from home. When I described what happened, the weird comments about my appearance, him ordering for me, the grabbing, and finally the biting, she got really quiet. "Honey," she said slowly, "this is going to sound strange, but have you ever read or seen 50 Shades of Grey?" I hadn't, but of course I knew what it was. My mom explained that so many of the details I'd described, his fixation on my appearance, ordering that specific tea, his clothing, even some of his dialogue, matched scenes from the books and movies. The main character is this pale, green-eyed woman with reddish-blonde hair. The male character is controlling, mysterious, orders a specific tea for her, wears gray suits, and yes, there's apparently a bizarre face-biting scene. It hit me that Tim hadn't been interested in me as a person at all. He'd been looking for someone who resembled a character, and when I matched closely enough, he tried to force me into his disturbing fantasy. Later, talking to other foreign students, I learned about something called riding the white horse, a gross term some men use for specifically targeting foreign women as trophies or exotic experiences. It made me feel sick to realize I'd been reduced to a stereotype, a fantasy, not even a real person in his eyes. I reported the incident to my study abroad coordinator, but since I only knew him as Tim and his profile had disappeared from the app, there wasn't much they could do except warn other students. For weeks afterward, I was constantly looking over my shoulder, afraid I'd see him watching me. I changed my routes to classes, never went out alone after dark, and deleted all my dating apps. The bruise on my face faded after about a week, but the anxiety lingered much longer. It's been 8 months, and I still get nervous when I see someone who resembles him. I still instinctively touch my cheek sometimes, remembering the shock and pain of that moment. What scares me most wasn't just what happened, but what could have happened if I hadn't trusted my instincts and gotten away when I did. If I'd gone with him to that wooded area. I don't even want to think about it. I ended up staying in Korea despite this experience. I wasn't going to let one terrifying encounter ruin my year abroad. Eventually, I met someone else through a language exchange program. Someone kind and respectful who never made me feel unsafe. We've been dating long distance since I returned home, and I'm moving back to Seoul next month to study and work. We're even talking about getting married someday. But I'll never forget that night with Tim. I'll never forget the look in his eyes when he realized I wasn't going to play along with whatever script he had in his head. Sometimes I wonder if he's still out there, searching dating apps for his perfect character. And I wonder how many other women weren't as lucky as I was. I still can't believe I was so stupid. Writing this makes my hands shake, but I need to get it out there. Maybe it'll help someone else not make the same mistake I did. I was 16 when I met Flip online. It was summer before junior year, and I was spending way too much time on social media. We started talking in a group chat about a show we both liked, and he was seriously funny, like laugh out loud funny. He was 19 in college and seemed so much more mature than the guys at my high school. We started DMing separately from the group, and soon we were talking every day. At first it was just memes and jokes, but then we started getting deeper. I told him about my boyfriend, my family drama, my anxiety about school, stuff I didn't even tell my real-life friends. He always knew exactly what to say to make me feel better. About 3 months in, things got weird. He told me he had feelings for me. I reminded him I had a boyfriend, and he said he knew, but couldn't help how he felt. I thought that was the end of it, but then he started disappearing. He'd ghost me for days, sometimes weeks, saying he couldn't handle talking to me knowing we couldn't be together. Each time he came back, I was so relieved. I felt like I needed his friendship. Looking back, there were so many red flags I ignored. He'd tweet these horrible things about women, how they were all promiscuous and manipulative, but would always say I was different. During his disappearing acts, he'd post vague things online that were obviously about me, like how I was playing with his feelings or leading him on. Then he'd come back acting like nothing happened. The control issues started small. He'd get upset if I didn't respond quickly enough. He'd question who I was hanging out with. Then it escalated. One time he said, "When you turn 18, you're going to send me pictures, and you don't get to say no." I laughed it off, but my stomach knotted up. Fast forward to my freshman year of college. I was 18, and my high school relationship had ended a few months earlier. Flip was ecstatic when I told him. He immediately started pushing for us to meet in person. When I hesitated, he gave me an ultimatum. Either we meet, or our friendship was over. I couldn't imagine losing him. He'd been there for me through everything, my breakup, starting college, fighting with my parents. So I did something incredibly stupid. I bought a plane ticket to visit him in December. I didn't tell my parents, said I was visiting a college friend. I barely had enough in my account to cover the ticket, but I was desperate to preserve this friendship. As the trip got closer, things got complicated. I started talking to this guy in my dorm building, and we really connected. I realized my feelings for Flip had always been forced, something I convinced myself of because he wanted it so badly. But I'd already bought the ticket, and Flip was so excited. I decided I'd go, but I'd make it clear we were just friends. The moment I stepped off the plane, my instincts screamed at me to turn around. Flip looked different, not physically. He looked like his pictures, but his energy was off. His smile didn't reach his eyes. When he hugged me, he held on too long, and I had to physically pull away. The drive to his apartment was awkward. He kept reaching for my hand, and I kept finding reasons to move it away. He lived in this dingy apartment complex that smelled like cigarettes and mildew. His roommate wasn't home. He'd conveniently gone to visit family for the weekend. I was exhausted from the flight, so I asked if I could take a nap. He said I could use his bed. I should have been more careful, but I was so tired I just crashed with my clothes on. I woke up to him touching me. His hand was under my shirt, on my bare stomach, creeping upward. I jerked away, and he acted like he'd done nothing wrong. "We're just friends, Flip," I said firmly. "I'm not here for that." His face changed. It's hard to describe, but it was like a mask slipped. For a second, I saw pure rage. Then he smiled, and it was somehow worse. "Sure," he said. "Friends, whatever you want." That was the beginning of the worst 3 days of my life. It's hard to explain how terrifying Flip was because he kept switching between normal and cruel. One minute he'd be making jokes and seeming like the guy I'd known online, and the next he'd be saying something that made my blood run cold. We went out for dinner that first night, and he made a joke about how easy it would be for me to disappear. "No one knows you're here," he said, laughing. "You could die and no one would know where to look." He said it so casually, like he was commenting on the weather. When I didn't laugh, he rolled his eyes. "God, lighten up." It was a joke. Back at his apartment, he kept finding reasons to touch me. My hair, my shoulder, my lower back. Each time I moved away, he'd get this tight look on his face. He kept trying to get me to drink, but I refused. I wasn't going to cloud my judgment around him. That night, I said I'd sleep on the couch. He got angry, saying I was being ridiculous and that we could share his bed like adults. I insisted, and he finally threw a blanket at me before slamming his bedroom door. I barely slept. I kept thinking about what he'd said at dinner. No one knew where I was. I'd told my roommate I was visiting an old friend but hadn't given details. My parents thought I was still at college. I felt completely alone. The next morning, Flip acted like everything was fine. He made breakfast and was charming, telling me all these plans he had for us. But when I checked my phone, I caught him watching me with this intense stare that disappeared as soon as I looked up. We went to a mall, and things seemed normal for a while. Then, out of nowhere, he raised his hand like he was going to hit me. I flinched and he burst out laughing. "You should see your face," he said, "like I'd ever hurt you." But his eyes said something different. Later, he casually mentioned he'd thought about sending my location to my mom. "I found her on Facebook," he said. "Considered messaging her to let her know where her daughter really is." He smiled when he saw my panic. "Relax, I didn't, but I could have." That night, he tried again to get me to sleep in his bed. When I refused, he said, "Fine, you can sleep in my car then." He wasn't joking. He actually grabbed my arm and tried to pull me toward the door. I yanked away and told him I'd scream if he touched me again. He backed off, calling me a tease and other names I don't want to repeat. I locked myself in the bathroom and cried silently. I had another full day before my flight. I considered calling the police, but what would I say? He hadn't technically done anything illegal. I thought about calling an Uber to a hotel, but I barely had any money left. The third day was the worst. He made us lunch, and after I'd eaten half my sandwich, he told me he'd used moldy sauce. "Just wanted to see if you'd notice," he said, watching me like he was studying my reaction. I ran to the bathroom, trying to make myself throw up, but nothing came up. I still don't know if he was telling the truth. That afternoon, he started talking about my flight the next day. "You know," he said casually, "the airport's pretty far. If someone were to drop you off in the wrong place, you might miss your flight." He kept emphasizing how dependent I was on him, how helpless my situation was. Every time he went to the bathroom or stepped outside to smoke, I'd frantically text the guy from my dorm. I didn't tell him everything. I was too embarrassed, but I said I was having a bad time and couldn't wait to get home. Those brief conversations were the only thing keeping me sane. That night, after another fight about sleeping arrangements, Flip finally went to his room and slammed the door. I heard him snoring around 1 a.m. Moving as quietly as possible, I packed my bag. I had memorized the address of a shopping plaza about half a mile away. My flight wasn't until 4 p.m., but I didn't care. I'd wait at the airport all day if I had to. I slipped out around 5 a.m. when it was still dark. I was halfway down the block when I heard running footsteps behind me. My heart nearly stopped. It was Flip. He must have heard the door. He caught up and grabbed me from behind, hugging me tight. I couldn't breathe. I thought this was it. This was how I died. But then he just said, "Thought you could leave without saying goodbye?" And he let go and ran back toward his apartment, like it was all a game. I ran all the way to the shopping plaza, checking behind me every few seconds. As soon as businesses started opening, I went into a coffee shop and called an Uber to the airport. I spent 8 hours there, jumping at every noise, certain he would show up. When I finally boarded that plane, I cried from relief. As soon as I got home, I blocked Flip on everything. He tried creating new accounts to reach me for months, sometimes just to say hi like nothing had happened, sometimes to call me horrible names. It's been a year and I still have nightmares. I never told my parents. I'm thankful I never gave him my address or too many details about my life. I don't know what would have happened if I had stayed that third night. I don't want to know. I'm still working through this with my therapist. The guy from my dorm is now my boyfriend, and he's the only one who knows the full story. Sometimes I wonder if Flip is doing this to other girls, if he's escalated. That thought keeps me up at night. If you're talking to someone online and they show these kinds of red flags, the controlling behavior, the guilt trips, the anger issues, please don't ignore them like I did. Trust your instincts. They might save your life. I still get sweaty palms typing this out, even though it happened 3 years ago when I was just a freshman. I never told my grandmother about it. I never told the police. To this day, I regret that. I had joined the track team that spring, hoping it would help me make friends at my new school. My parents had sent me to live with my grandmother after their divorce got messy, and I was the awkward new kid trying to find my place. Track seemed perfect. No special skills required, just running, right? Wrong. I was terrible at it, like embarrassingly bad. Our coach, Ms. Daniels, was one of those former college athletes who couldn't understand why everyone wasn't naturally athletic. She'd sigh whenever I lagged behind, which was always. The team practiced at this city park about a half mile from school. There was this big pond there, More like a small lake, really, that everyone called Stalker Lake. I thought it was just a stupid nickname until I asked Jenny, one of the seniors, about it. "It's 'cause of all the creeps that hang around there," she told me while stretching. "Some guy exposed himself to a jogger last year. Another girl said someone followed her for a whole loop. The cops patrol it sometimes, but they never catch anyone." I remember feeling uneasy, but figured we'd be fine as a group. Besides, we always ran during daylight hours, right after school let out around 3:30. That Tuesday in April started like any other practice. It was unusually warm, and the park was pretty empty. Ms. Daniels gathered us near the lake's main entrance. "Today we're doing endurance training, 3 loops around the lake maintaining consistent pace." She looked at her clipboard. "And remember, buddy up, no one runs alone." The lake path was about a mile around, with half of it cutting through these dense woods with thick brush. The other half ran alongside a more open area with a playground and picnic tables. The buddy system made sense. The wooded section was completely isolated from view. Everyone quickly paired up, but of course, no one picked me. When I looked around, the only other person without a partner was Zach, the fastest guy on the team. He made a face when Ms. Daniels pointed at me. "Coach, come on, she can't keep up with me," he complained. "Figure it out," she said, already turning her attention to her stopwatch. Zach rolled his eyes. "Just don't fall too far behind, I guess." We started running, and predictably, Zach took off. Within 5 minutes, I couldn't even see him anymore. The faster runners were already disappearing around the curve ahead, while I struggled to maintain what felt like a decent pace. By the time I finished my first loop, most of the team was already halfway through their second. Ms. Daniels frowned as I passed the starting point. "Pick up the pace, Morgan. You're way behind." My legs were already burning, but I tried to push harder on the second loop. My lungs felt like they were filled with fire. As I reached the wooded section for the second time, I realized I was completely alone. No runners ahead of me, none behind me. Just me and the narrow dirt path winding through the trees. By my third loop, I was exhausted. The rest of the team must have finished already. I hadn't seen anyone from the team for at least 10 minutes. The spring sun was getting lower, casting long shadows through the trees. I reached the halfway point of the lake loop, the most isolated section, where the path curves away from the road and cuts deepest into the woods. That's when I got a stitch in my side, that sharp, stabbing pain that makes it impossible to run. I slowed to a walk, clutching my ribs, trying to breathe through it. The woods were quiet, except for birds and the distant sound of cars on the main road that I couldn't see anymore. I remember checking my watch, 5:17 p.m. I'd been out there nearly 2 hours already. Grandma would be wondering where I was soon. That's when I heard it. A rustle in the bushes behind me, followed by the unmistakable sound of footsteps on the dirt path. Heavy footsteps, adult footsteps. My first thought was that it was another runner, but something felt wrong. The steps were too deliberate, too measured. I started walking faster, and the footsteps behind me quickened too. I didn't look back. Something deep in my gut told me not to. I just knew, if I saw his face, he'd have to make sure I couldn't identify him later. My heart started hammering in my chest. The stitch in my side was forgotten as adrenaline flooded my system. I picked up my pace to a slow jog, testing my theory. The footsteps behind me matched my pace exactly. Maybe I was overreacting? Maybe it was just another jogger who happened to be maintaining the same speed? I slowed slightly. The footsteps slowed too. Oh God, I sped up again, pushing into a run despite my fatigue. The footsteps behind me broke into a run as well. They were getting closer. I could hear breathing now, deep, masculine breathing. Not the controlled breathing of a regular jogger, but excited, anticipatory breathing. I didn't dare look back. I just ran. My legs, which had felt like lead weights just minutes before, suddenly felt light. Terror is an amazing motivator. I ran faster than I ever had during practice, faster than I thought possible. My lungs burned and my muscles screamed, but the sound of those footsteps kept me moving. They were right behind me now, so close I could hear a wheezing quality to the breathing. I could almost feel the presence at my back, like a cold shadow. I imagined hands reaching for my ponytail, grabbing the back of my shirt. The wooded section of the path seemed endless. Trees and bushes blurred past me. I knew the open area was coming up soon, but it felt like I'd been running forever. My only thought was to reach where other people might see me. I pushed harder, ignoring the fire in my lungs. The footsteps were right on my heels. I could hear the crunch of dirt and gravel with each step, almost in sync with mine, but slightly off, like an echo. Finally, the trees thinned, and I could see the playground area ahead. There were a few people there, a mom with a toddler, an old man walking a dog, normal people, safe people. I heard a change in the breathing behind me, a frustrated wheeze, heavier now, labored. I found one last burst of energy and sprinted forward. The footsteps faltered. They slowed, while mine didn't. For the first time, I was pulling ahead. I didn't stop when I reached the playground. I didn't stop at the lake entrance. I ran all the way back to school, constantly listening for those footsteps to return. They never did. The school was mostly empty by then. The track team was gone. Practice had officially ended 40 minutes earlier. No one had waited for me. No one had noticed I was missing. My legs finally gave out on the steps of the school. I collapsed, gulping air, my shirt soaked with sweat. I fumbled for my phone to call my grandmother, but realized I'd left it in my locker, like we were supposed to during practice. I walked home on shaky legs, jumping at every sound, constantly looking over my shoulder. When I got home, my grandmother was worried about how late I was, but seemed to accept my excuse about practice running long. I didn't tell her what happened. She was 73 with a heart condition. I was afraid the stress would be too much for her. I didn't go back to track practice. I told Ms. Daniels I was quitting, and when she asked why, I just mumbled something about not being good enough. I should have told her. I should have reported it to someone. But I was 15 and scared and didn't want to cause problems. It was only months later, after I heard about a woman who was attacked on the same path, that the full weight of what nearly happened hit me. The news report said she fought off a man who tried to drag her into the woods. The description, a white man in his 40s with a baseball cap, made my blood run cold. I remembered the heavy breathing behind me, the persistence of the chase. This wasn't some random jogger who happened to be on the same path. This was someone hunting. Looking back, I realize how many safety rules I broke that day. I ran alone in an isolated area with a history of incidents. I didn't have my phone. No one knew exactly where I was. I was a teenage girl who clearly looked like a child, an easy target. I'm a senior now, and I still run, but differently. I carry pepper spray clipped to my waistband. My phone is always with me, with location sharing turned on. I stick to crowded streets, even though the cars and noise and lack of privacy annoy me. I never run the same route 2 days in a row, and I never ever run around Stalker Lake. The Park District did nothing about the security issues there. No cameras were installed. The brush wasn't cleared. They just posted a small sign advising people not to walk alone, as if that absolved them of responsibility. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I had been just a little slower that day, or if I had turned around to see who was chasing me. Would my face have been on a missing person poster? Would they have found me at all? I still haven't told my grandmother. But I'm writing this because maybe someone else needs to hear it. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And if you feel like you're being hunted, run like your life depends on it, because it might. I've never actually written this all out before. It's been 15 years now, but every time I'm alone on public transit or walking down an empty street at dusk, I still feel that same panic rising in my chest. I still turn around constantly to check behind me. I still avoid eye contact with strangers. And I still wonder about that cop and what might have happened if he hadn't shown up. I was 21 and had just moved to the city for my first real job after college. Growing up in a small town, I thought I was being careful, but looking back, I was painfully naive. This happened in late October 2008. I remember because the Halloween decorations in store windows seemed to mock me afterward with their plastic horror. That particular Thursday, I was meeting my friend Allie downtown after work. We'd planned to check out this new Thai restaurant everyone was talking about. I worked at a marketing firm about 30 minutes from downtown by subway. Nothing fancy, just an entry-level position, but I felt so professional in my new blazer and sensible heels. The workday had been normal. I stayed a little late finishing up some copy for a project due the next morning. By the time I left the office, it was already getting dark. October evenings come quickly, and the city skyline was turning that hazy purple-orange as I descended into the subway station. The ride was uneventful. Just the usual crowd of tired office workers staring at their phones or zoning out to whatever was playing through their headphones. I remember feeling hungry, thinking about pad thai, and annoyed that I'd forgotten to charge my iPod the night before. When the train pulled into my stop downtown, I noticed something odd. Almost everyone seemed to be going the same direction, away from the main exit I usually took. There was a construction worker in an orange vest directing people down a different corridor. I overheard him saying something about renovations on the main stairwell. Here's where I made my first mistake. I saw a few people slip past him toward the regular exit, and I thought, that'll be faster to the restaurant. So I followed them, not wanting to take the longer route. The others who had gone that way must have moved quickly because within seconds, I found myself alone in the corridor. The regular exit was partially blocked with yellow caution tape, but there was still enough space to walk through. A small sign read, "Use alternate exit," but there was nothing indicating it was actually closed or dangerous. Just inconvenient, I figured. I pushed through the turnstile and started up the stairs. The stairwell smelled of fresh paint and that distinctive construction dust. Halfway up, I realized I was completely alone. No footsteps ahead or behind me. Just the distant echo of the subway below. That tingling sensation started at the back of my neck, but I pushed it away. I was in a public place, after all, in a city of over 2 million people. What could possibly happen? When I emerged onto the street, it was much darker than I expected. One of the streetlights near the entrance was out, casting that section of sidewalk in shadow. I squinted at my watch, 6:45 p.m. I was supposed to meet Allie at 7:00. The sidewalk was strangely empty. On a normal weekday evening, this area would be bustling with commuters. Instead, I saw maybe 2 people half a block away, walking in the opposite direction. I realized the construction must have been diverting foot traffic to the other side of the building. For a split second, I considered going back down and taking the alternate route. Something felt off. But then I thought how silly that seemed. It would take me an extra 10 minutes at least, and I'd be late meeting Allie. Besides, the restaurant was only 4 blocks away. I'd just walk around the building and be on my way. I pulled my jacket tighter and started walking. The concrete canyon between the high-rises created a wind tunnel effect, and the October chill cut right through my clothes. I quickened my pace, my heels clicking loudly in the unusual silence. That's when I first noticed him. In the distance, maybe half a block away, a figure on a bicycle appeared, weaving bizarrely across the wide sidewalk. At first I thought maybe it was a kid doing tricks. But as he got closer, I could see it was a man, definitely an adult. He was pedaling in these erratic S patterns, sometimes going all the way from one side of the sidewalk to the other. I moved to the far right to give him plenty of room to pass. But instead of continuing past me, he adjusted his path to intercept mine. My stomach dropped. He was probably in his late 40s or early 50s, with gray-streaked hair that hung limply around his face. His clothes were worn and dirty, layers of mismatched items that had clearly not been washed in weeks. This wasn't unusual in the city. I passed homeless people daily. But something about his focused intensity as he approached made my mouth go dry. When he was about 15 feet away, he called out to me, "Hey, miss, hold up a minute." I pretended not to hear, keeping my eyes forward and walking faster. City rule number 1, don't engage. But he was persistent, circling his bike around to block my path. I had to stop or risk colliding with him. He straddled his bicycle, an old rusty mountain bike with plastic bags hanging from the handlebars, and grinned at me. "Hey, beautiful, where are you going in such a hurry?" His voice was raspy, like he'd been smoking for decades. "I'm late to meet someone," I said firmly, trying to step around him. "Excuse me." He moved his bike to block me again. "I just want to talk to you for a minute, just 1 minute." My heart was hammering now. I glanced around. Still no one else on this stretch of sidewalk. The building beside us had a revolving door, but through the glass I could see the security desk was empty. The lobby lights were dimmed, business hours over. "I really need to go," I said, louder this time. "What's your name?" he asked, ignoring my obvious discomfort. "I'm Dave. You're too pretty to be walking alone." I didn't answer, just tried again to step around him. He pedaled backwards, staying in front of me. "You got a boyfriend?" he asked, his eyes never leaving my face. "Bet you do. Pretty girl like you." "I'm meeting him right now," I lied. "He's waiting for me. He'll be worried." Dave laughed. "No, you ain't. You're all alone." The way he said it made my skin crawl, like he'd been watching me, like he knew. Then he reached into one of the plastic bags hanging from his handlebars and pulled out, of all things, a beeper, an actual pager, like from the 90s in 2008. "I want you to have my beeper number," he said, suddenly earnest, "so you can call me any time. We should go get coffee." I shook my head. "No, thank you. I really need to go." His face changed then. The friendly facade dropped and his eyes hardened. "Why not?" he demanded. "You think you're too good for me?" "No, I'm really late and—" "Just take my number," he insisted, his voice rising. He fumbled in another bag and pulled out a crumpled receipt and a stubby pencil. He scribbled something down and held it out to me, his hand visibly shaking. I didn't want to take it. Every instinct was screaming at me to run. But I remembered what happened to a woman at my college who'd rejected a man's advances outside a bar. He'd followed her to her car and smashed her windshield while screaming obscenities. I was alone with this man on an empty street, and he was becoming increasingly agitated, so I just stood there, frozen. That's when he dismounted the bike. In one fluid motion, he swung his leg over and let the bike clatter to the sidewalk between us. He was shorter than I'd realized, maybe 5'7", but stocky. His hands were filthy, with dirt caked under the nails. I wish I could say I ran. I wish I could say I screamed or fought or did anything at all, but I didn't. My body betrayed me in that moment, freezing completely. Later, a therapist would tell me this was a trauma response from a previous assault in college, something I'd never properly dealt with. But in that moment, all I knew was that I couldn't move, couldn't speak, could barely breathe. "At least shake my hand," he said, extending his grimy palm toward me. "I'm just being friendly. You can be friendly, can't you?" Somehow I managed to nod slightly. My self-preservation instinct was kicking in. Just appease him and find a way out. So I reached out to quickly shake his hand, thinking it would satisfy him enough to let me pass. It was a mistake. As soon as my hand touched his other arm shot out and wrapped around my waist, yanking me toward him with surprising strength. Before I could process what was happening, he had me in a bear hug, his face pressing against mine. And then he was kissing me. Not just my mouth, which I kept firmly closed, but my cheeks, my neck, my forehead. Wet, slobbery kisses that left traces of his saliva on my skin. I could smell alcohol on his breath, mixed with the sour stench of unwashed body and something else. A medicinal smell I couldn't identify. I tried to push him away, but my arms were partially trapped against his chest. I managed to turn my face away, but that just gave him access to my neck. His beard stubble scratched my skin as he pressed his mouth against my throat. It couldn't have lasted more than 10 or 15 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. The entire time my brain was screaming, but my body remained rigid with shock and fear. I remember thinking with strange clarity, "This can't be happening. Not here, not like this." And then, like some miracle from a movie, I heard a shout. "Hey, get your hands off her!" Dave's grip loosened slightly, and I managed to turn my head toward the voice. A police officer on a bicycle was speeding toward us, his face set in determination. He was maybe 30, athletic-looking in his dark uniform, and he was reaching for something on his belt as he approached. Dave immediately released me and stepped back, his hands up in surrender. "We're just talking, officer," he said, his voice suddenly calm. "Just friends saying hello." The officer pulled his bike to a stop between us. "Ma'am, do you know this man?" he asked me, his eyes never leaving Dave. Finally, my body responded. "No," I managed to choke out. And then, as if a spell had been broken, I could move again. I started backing away, then turned and began walking quickly, then running. "Ma'am, wait!" the officer called after me. "I need to take a statement." But I couldn't stop. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I knew was that I needed to get away. From Dave. From that spot. From what had just happened. So I ran, my heels clacking wildly on the pavement, my purse bouncing against my hip. I didn't stop until I reached the next subway station 2 blocks away. I collapsed onto a bench, lungs burning, legs shaking. People stared, but no one approached. Typical city behavior. Mind your own business. That's where Allie found me 10 minutes later, still trembling on the bench. One look at my face, and she knew something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked, sitting beside me and putting an arm around my shoulders. I opened my mouth to tell her, but instead I burst into tears. Between sobs, I managed to explain what had happened. As I spoke, I became aware of a crawling sensation on my skin. Everywhere he had touched me felt contaminated. I kept wiping at my neck and face, trying to remove the memory of his lips. "We need to report this," Allie said firmly. "That's sexual assault." But I shook my head. A cop already saw. He was there. He intervened. "Did you give a statement? Get his badge number?" I hadn't. I'd just run. And now, sitting safely in a crowded subway station with my friend beside me, I felt foolish. The bike cop had been trying to help, and I'd fled like a scared animal. Allie insisted we go to the bathroom so I could wash my face. In the harsh fluorescent light of the public restroom, I saw the red marks on my neck where his stubble had scratched me. I scrubbed at my skin until it was raw, but I couldn't wash away the feeling of violation. We never made it to the Thai restaurant. Instead, Allie took me back to her apartment, ordered delivery, and let me use her shower. I stayed there that night, unable to face being alone. The next day, I called in sick to work and went to the police station to file a report. I described the bike officer and what had happened, hoping to both report the assault and maybe find out who had helped me so I could thank him. But the desk sergeant told me they had dozens of bike officers patrolling downtown, and without a badge number or name, it would be difficult to identify who had been there. I gave them a description of Dave and the location, but I knew the chances of anything coming from it were slim. He was just another transient in a big city. The officer took my statement with a sympathetic but resigned expression that told me everything I needed to know. For weeks afterward, I took different routes to work. I carried pepper spray. I looked over my shoulder constantly. I had nightmares about dirty hands and wet kisses forced on my skin. 15 years later, I still think about it sometimes. I still wonder about that bike cop and whether he was actually able to arrest the man, or if Dave just disappeared into the city as soon as I ran. I wonder if he did the same thing to other women before or after me. And I wonder what might have happened if that officer hadn't appeared when he did. I never found out the identity of the bike cop who saved me. Whoever you are, thank you. I wish I had stopped to thank you properly that day, but all I could think about was getting away. I hope somehow you know you made a difference. And to anyone reading this, especially young women new to big cities, please don't make the mistakes I made. Don't take shortcuts through deserted areas, even if they seem safe. Don't worry about seeming rude to strangers who make you uncomfortable. Your safety is more important than their feelings. And if your instincts are telling you something's wrong, listen to them. Because sometimes the monsters aren't hiding in dark alleys. Sometimes they're right there in broad daylight, asking for your name and holding out their hand. I still get chills thinking about what happened that night in Berlin. I know it could have gone so much worse. I mean, a gun in Germany. That shit just doesn't happen here. This was about 8 months ago, back when weed was in that weird legal gray area. Technically not legal yet, but cops didn't really care unless you were being stupid about it. I'd been living in Wedding for about 2 years by then. For those who don't know Berlin, Wedding isn't exactly the posh part of town. It's mostly working class, with a big immigrant population, especially from Arabic countries. Lots of kebab shops, shisha bars, that kind of thing. Most people are just normal folks trying to get by, but there's definitely some sketchy business going on too. That night started like any other Thursday. I came home from my bartending shift around midnight, exhausted but still too wired to sleep. I hopped on Discord with some friends from back home who were just starting their day on the West Coast. We all lit up, them with their fancy legal dispensary stuff, me with my slightly sketchy dealer weed, and just shot the shit for a couple hours. Around 3 a.m., I got the munchies bad. Couldn't think of anything else bad. My fridge was empty except for some old cheese and mustard, so I decided to make a run to the Spati. That's what we call convenience stores here. About 4 blocks away. It was February, so fucking freezing, but I figured the walk would clear my head a bit. I'm not usually the type to smoke in public. Too paranoid, I guess. But it was the middle of the night, freezing cold, and I wasn't thinking straight. So I rolled a small joint for the walk. Nothing big, just enough to maintain my buzz. I threw on my heaviest coat, a beanie, grabbed my keys and wallet. As I was heading out, I remembered I still had my tips from the past 3 shifts in my wallet. I bartended at this place in Mitte, and it had been too busy to hit the bank. We're talking almost 300 euros in cash. For a split second, I thought about leaving it behind, but then I figured, it's just a quick trip. What could happen? Jesus, I wish I'd listened to that first instinct. The streets were empty and eerily quiet, just the occasional car passing by, the kind of silence you only get in big cities in the dead of night. I lit my joint about halfway there, taking slow drags as I walked. The cold air made the smoke more visible than usual, hanging around me in little clouds. As I approached this intersection near Leopoldplatz, I noticed a group of guys hanging out on the corner. 4 of them, maybe in their 20s or early 30s, just standing there despite the cold. Not super unusual for the area, but still, something about it made me uneasy. They all turned to look at me as I walked past. I avoided eye contact, took one last drag, and flicked the joint away before I got too close. I nodded slightly as I passed them, not friendly, just acknowledging their presence, the way you do in rough neighborhoods. They didn't nod back, just watched me. I crossed the street, telling myself I was being paranoid from the weed. I was maybe 15 meters past them when I heard someone call out behind me, "Routine ID check, please show me your identification." My heart dropped into my stomach. Shit, police, and I reeked of weed. I turned around slowly, trying to remember if I had anything illegal on me. The joint was gone, but the smell was definitely on my clothes. That's when I realized something was very wrong. It wasn't cops. It was the guys from the corner walking toward me now. The one in front, taller than the others with a dark beard and a black puffy jacket, was the one who'd spoken. His German had a heavy accent. "Police officers, we need to see your ID," he said again as they approached. My brain was working overtime through the haze. These guys weren't cops, no uniforms, no badges. The tall one must have sensed my hesitation because he added, "Undercover police, criminal division." I've dealt with actual undercover cops in Berlin before. They always immediately show you their badge and ID card. These guys had nothing. And as the tall one got closer, I could see his pupils were massive, like taking up most of his iris. He was definitely on something, probably coke or MDMA. "Can I see your police identification?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He ignored the question. Instead, they started to spread out, subtly positioning themselves around me. The tall one in front, one to my right, 2 behind me. Classic predator formation. My mouth went dry instantly. "You were smoking marijuana," tall guy said. "Empty your pockets. We need to check what else you have." That's when I knew for sure this was a robbery. They weren't even trying that hard with the police act. In those few seconds, my mind raced through all the things I had on me, my phone, my keys, and fuck those 300 euros. My hands started trembling, not just from fear, but from the cold too. Or at least that's what I told myself. "I don't have anything," I said, my breath visible in the freezing air. "Empty your pockets," he repeated, harder this time. "Now." I slowly reached toward my jacket pocket, and that's when I saw it. As tall guy shifted his weight, his jacket opened slightly, and there, tucked into his waistband, was what looked unmistakably like a Glock pistol. My blood turned to ice. Guns are extraordinarily rare in Germany. Our police barely even draw their weapons. In my 2 years here, I'd never seen one outside of a police holster. The fact that this guy had one meant this wasn't just some opportunistic mugging. These guys were serious criminals. I tried to keep my eyes from fixating on the gun, but Tall Guy noticed. He smirked slightly and adjusted his jacket to cover it better. The message was clear. Don't try anything stupid. My mind was racing, calculating odds, possibilities. If I ran, would they shoot? If I gave them everything, would they let me go? Would they hurt me anyway? I wasn't thinking clearly. The weed definitely wasn't helping. But somehow a weird calm settled over me. The kind that comes when you realize you're completely fucked and your only option is to play the situation as smartly as possible. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a single €5 bill. I held it out, making sure to keep my hand visible and movement slow. "This is all I have," I said. "I was just going to the spatty for some food." Tall Guy looked at the bill, then back at me, clearly skeptical. "Your wallet," he demanded, holding out his hand. "Phone too." This was the moment I had to make a decision. Giving them my phone would suck, but it was the money I was really worried about. €300 is a lot when you're living paycheck to paycheck in one of Europe's most expensive cities. And then I remembered something my Turkish neighbor had told me a few months back during a building BBQ. We'd been talking about neighborhood safety, and he'd mentioned that many of the Arab guys in the area were wary of Russians because of connections to organized crime. The Russian mob had a presence in Berlin, and they had a reputation for brutal retaliation. I don't know if it was desperation or inspiration, but in that moment, I decided to gamble everything on a bluff. I straightened up slightly and let my face harden. Then I spoke in the heaviest Russian accent I could muster. Thank God for all those hours of watching Eastern European YouTube. "My friends have wallet. They meet me here soon, very soon." The change in their demeanor was subtle but immediate. Tall Guy's eyes flicked to his companions, a quick, uncertain glance. "What friends?" he asked, his own accent more pronounced now, revealing his nerves. "Friends from club," I said, keeping my sentences deliberately broken and short. "They have my things. They come now. They wait at my apartment, but when I take too long, they come looking." It was complete bullshit, of course. I lived alone, and the only people awake at this hour who knew me were thousands of miles away, voices in my headset. But I could see the calculation happening behind their eyes. Was I telling the truth? Was I connected? Was this small score worth the risk of pissing off people who might retaliate? The language barrier was actually helping me. Their German wasn't perfect, and neither was my fake Russian-accented German. The confusion created just enough uncertainty. Tall Guy looked at me hard, trying to decide if I was bluffing. I stared back, channeling every tough guy I'd ever seen in movies, hoping my face wasn't betraying the absolute terror I felt inside. After what felt like forever but was probably only seconds, Tall Guy pointed at the €5 still in my hand. "Buy us drinks," he said. "Coca-Cola, 6 bottles." It took me a moment to process this bizarre turn. He was letting me go to the store to buy them sodas with the €5 I'd claimed was all I had. I nodded slowly, not wanting to seem too eager. "Da, Coca-Cola." The guy to my right stepped aside, creating a path toward the spatty that was now visible down the block. I walked forward carefully, expecting at any moment to feel a hand grab me or worse. The tall guy and one other followed a few meters behind me, while the other 2 stayed at the corner. The fluorescent lights of the spatty felt like stepping into another dimension. The old Turkish guy behind the counter barely looked up from his phone as I walked in. I grabbed a 6-pack of Coke bottles from the refrigerator, constantly aware of the 2 men waiting outside, visible through the store's foggy windows. As I paid, I briefly considered asking the clerk for help, but what could he do? Call the police? They'd be long gone before anyone arrived, and I'd still have to go back outside where the other guys were waiting. And what if they really did have a gun? I couldn't risk it. I took the plastic bag of Cokes and walked back outside, my heart still hammering in my chest. I handed the bag to Tall Guy, who took it without a word. Then came the moment I was dreading. What would happen next? Would they still demand my wallet? Would they realize I'd been bluffing about the Russian friends? Tall Guy looked at me for a long moment, then made a dismissive gesture with his chin. "Go," he said simply. I stood there, not quite believing it. "Go," he repeated, harder this time. I didn't need to be told a third time. I turned and walked away, forcing myself not to run, keeping my pace steady and my back straight. Every step, I expected to hear footsteps behind me, or worse, a gunshot. But there was nothing except the sound of my own breathing and the distant hum of the city. I didn't look back until I'd turned the corner, and when I did, they were gone. Just empty sidewalk under yellow streetlights. I practically sprinted the rest of the way home, fumbled with my keys at the door, and once inside, collapsed against the wall, shaking uncontrollably. The adrenaline crash hit me hard. I checked my pocket. The wad of tip money was still there, untouched. I didn't sleep at all that night. Kept replaying the scenario in my head, thinking of all the ways it could have gone wrong. I still don't know why they let me go so easily. Maybe they believed my Russian act. Maybe they decided I wasn't worth the trouble. Maybe they just wanted the Cokes. I'll never know. What I do know is that I've never walked alone at night in that neighborhood again. I take Ubers home from work now, even though it eats into my tips. I don't carry cash if I can avoid it, and I definitely don't smoke on the street anymore. It's crazy how one night can change your entire sense of security. 8 months later, and I still get nervous when I see groups of guys hanging out on corners. I still check over my shoulder more than I need to, and I'm still not sure if I made a brilliant split-second decision or just got incredibly lucky. Either way, I'm alive, and those 300 euros stayed in my pocket. But man, that was the most expensive six-pack of Coke I ever bought. I've never told the full story of what happened that summer when I was 13. I think about it sometimes when I'm driving past a lake, or when I smell that specific mix of lake water and campfire smoke. But honestly, even now, I get a tight feeling in my chest when I remember how close we came to just being gone. This happened at Pine Lake Campground, about 3 hours north of my hometown in Ontario. My family didn't own a camper or anything fancy, but my aunt and uncle had this seasonal spot they'd been keeping for years. Mom would drop me, and sometimes a friend off to stay with them for a week or two every summer. That year, I'd convinced my best friend Kay to come along. We were from this tiny town, where everyone knew everyone, and growing up there meant we both had this automatic trust of strangers that seems crazy to me now. Our parents would literally just tell us, "Be home by dark," and we'd spend the entire day roaming around, talking to whoever. The campground was this perfect summer place, a little camp store that sold ice cream, a playground, and the lake with its public dock where everyone hung out. We'd been there for 4 days already, mostly riding our bikes around the trails, catching frogs in the marshy areas, and swimming whenever it got too hot. My aunt and uncle were pretty relaxed. They'd let us wander as long as we showed up for meals and were back before dark. That day had been particularly good. We'd found this incredible swimming spot on the far side of the lake where the water was clearer, and Kay had managed to do a backflip off a low rock ledge. We were absolutely exhausted by early evening, but in that good way where you feel like you've truly made the most of a summer day. We decided to go sit at the main dock and cool our feet in the water before heading back to the campsite for dinner. It was that perfect time of day, maybe 7:30 or 8 p.m. in summer, where the sun is starting to set, but there's still plenty of light. The lake had that glass, smooth look it gets sometimes in the evening, with just a bit of gold reflecting off the surface. We were sitting there, our legs dangling off the edge of the dock, talking about which boys at school we thought were cute when this man walked onto the dock. I remember the hollow sound his boots made on the wooden planks. He wasn't walking fast, just sort of shuffling along, and he had this way of looking around like he was checking to see who was watching him. He was older, maybe in his 40s or 50s, with this patchy stubble that wasn't quite a beard. He was wearing jeans with these weird stains on the knees and a faded beer t-shirt, Molson Canadian, I think. His hair was greasy and pushed back, and I noticed right away that he was missing one of his front teeth. But honestly, this didn't seem weird to me at the time. He looked like half the men on my dad's side of the family, especially my Uncle Rob, who worked at the paper mill. "Evening, girls," he said, sitting down about 3 feet from us. "Catching any fish?" "We're not fishing," Kay said. She was always more blunt than me. "Just cooling off." "Smart," he said, nodding like we'd said something profound. "It's a hot one today." I remember thinking his voice didn't match his appearance. It was softer, almost gentle. He had this accent I couldn't place. Not quite local, but not obviously from somewhere else either. "You two camping here?" he asked, and I nodded. "With my aunt and uncle," I said. "We're staying at their trailer." "Which site you at?" he asked immediately. Looking back, this should have been a red flag, but at the time it just seemed like normal small talk. "The seasonal area," I said. "Number 47. "Ah, the seasonals," he said, nodding knowingly. "That's where all the regulars are. I know most folks around here. Been coming to this lake since I was younger than you two. What's your folks' names? Bet I know 'em." "My aunt and uncle are Deb and Mike," I said. "But my parents don't come here. They just drop me off." "Mike and Deb!" he exclaimed, snapping his fingers. Sure, great people. I've had beers with Mike plenty of times. And what about your parents? Where are they from?" "Ridgeville," I said. "Susan and John." His eyes lit up in a way that made me feel weirdly special, like I'd just made his day. "No way! Susan and John from Ridgeville. I know them well. We go way back. Used to fish with your dad all the time." I felt this immediate sense of comfort wash over me. If he knew my parents, he must be okay. Even Kay, who was usually more cautious, seemed to relax. "So, what have you girls been up to today?" he asked, scooting a little closer. We told him about our swimming and frog-catching adventures, and he seemed genuinely interested, asking questions about where exactly we'd found the frogs and which trail we'd taken to the swimming spot. Every answer we gave seemed to delight him, like we were the most fascinating people he'd ever met. "You girls like boats?" he asked suddenly, pointing out across the water. There were maybe 6 or 7 boats moored at various docks around the lake, but he was pointing to a particularly nice one. It had this gold-flecked metallic finish that caught the setting sun and made it glitter. "That one's mine," he said proudly. "Fastest boat on the lake. Coolest, too, if you ask most folks around here." "That's your boat?" Kay asked, sounding impressed. "It looks expensive." "Cost me a pretty penny," he said, leaning in like he was telling us a secret. "But worth every cent. You ever been out on a boat like that?" We both shook our heads. My uncle had a small aluminum fishing boat with an outboard motor, but nothing like the sleek speedboat this man was claiming as his own. "Tell you what," he said, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Have you girls ever been to any of the secret islands on this lake?" Kay and I looked at each other, confused. Pine Lake wasn't very big, and as far as I knew, there weren't any islands on it at all. "There aren't any islands here," Kay said, voicing what I was thinking. He laughed, a strange wheezing sound that made me think of my granddad, who had emphysema. "That's what most folks think, but there's a few hidden ones that only people who really know this lake can find. I've got one all to myself, named it Zeke. Got a little cabin on it and everything." "Really?" I asked, now genuinely curious. "How come we've never seen any islands when we swim?" "They're hidden behind those tall pine trees on the north end," he explained, gesturing vaguely toward the far side of the lake. "You can only get there by boat, and only if you know exactly where to go. Otherwise, you just see trees from the shore." The idea was fascinating. A secret island that only this man knew about. I tried to picture it. A tiny piece of land with a rustic cabin, surrounded by water, completely private. "You girls want to see it?" he asked, his voice suddenly excited. "I could take you there right now on my boat. It's only about 10 minutes away. We could be there and back before dark." I felt a flutter of excitement. A boat ride and a secret island. What could be cooler than that? Kay looked interested too, and we started to stand up. "I've got some sodas in the cooler on the boat," he added, also standing, "and I might even have some candy bars left from my last trip." Just as we were about to follow him down the dock, I heard the familiar sound of my uncle's truck horn. 2 short honks that he always did when he was picking us up. I turned to see his blue Chevy pulled up at the shoreline, his arm hanging out the window, waving us over. "That's my uncle," I said, feeling a strange mix of disappointment and, though I didn't recognize it at the time, relief. "Ah, shoot," the man said, his whole demeanor changing. His shoulders slumped and his friendly smile disappeared. "Maybe another time, then." Kay and I grabbed our towels and flip-flops. "Nice meeting you," I called over my shoulder as we hurried toward my uncle's truck. The man didn't respond, just turned to look out at the lake. When we reached the truck, my uncle looked at his watch pointedly. "You girls were supposed to be back by dark. Aunt Deb's got dinner waiting." "Sorry," I said, climbing into the back seat with Kay. "We were talking to that man about his boat." "What man?" my uncle asked, looking toward the dock where the man had been standing just moments before. But he was gone. I hadn't even seen him walk away. "He was just there," Kay said. "The guy with the gold boat. He was going to take us to see his island." My uncle frowned, putting the truck in reverse. "Gold boat? You mean Phil's boat? From the camp store?" "No," I insisted. "This man said it was his boat, the fastest one on the lake. And he said he has an island called Zeke," Kay added. My uncle's face changed then, in a way I'd never seen before. He stopped the truck and turned around to look at us directly. "Listen to me carefully," he said, his voice deadly serious. "There are no islands on this lake, none. And that gold boat belongs to Phil, who runs the convenience store. I was just talking to him an hour ago at the store. What did this man look like?" We described him, the missing tooth, the beer shirt, the greasy hair. "Did he tell you his name?" my uncle asked. We both realized then that he hadn't. He'd asked us loads of questions about ourselves, but had never offered his own name. "He said he knew my parents," I added. "Said he used to go fishing with my dad all the time." My uncle was already pulling out his cell phone. "We're going to call your parents right now." 10 minutes later, after a tense conversation with my mom, who definitely did not know any man matching that description, we were sitting at the campsite picnic table with both my aunt and uncle. They'd called the campground manager, who was now talking to the few other campers who had been around the lake that evening. "He said the boat was his," I repeated, still not fully understanding the situation, "and that we could go see his island." "There are no islands on this lake," my uncle said again, his voice gentle but firm. "And that man doesn't own that boat. He was lying to you girls." "But why would he lie?" Kay asked, her voice small. My aunt put her arm around Kay's shoulders. "Because some people want to trick kids into going with them. And once they get you alone—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I suddenly felt sick to my stomach. We had been moments away from following that man to his boat, which wasn't even his. Would he have tried to force us into a car instead? Would anyone have seen? Would anyone have heard if we screamed? The campground manager came by later that evening to tell us they hadn't found anyone matching the description, but they'd alert the local police and have the staff keep an eye out. He gave Kay and me a stern talk about not talking to strangers and never, ever going anywhere with someone we didn't know, even if they claimed to know our parents. We stayed 3 more days at the campground, but we weren't allowed to go anywhere without my aunt or uncle after that. The carefree part of our vacation was over. I kept looking for the man everywhere we went, both hoping to see him so he could be caught, and terrified of seeing him. Because what if he was angry we'd told on him? He never showed up again. The police came and took statements from us, but they didn't seem hopeful about finding him. "Probably just passed through," one officer said. "These types move around a lot." These types. Like there was a whole category of men who prowled campgrounds looking for children to lure away. I often think about how easily things could have gone differently that day. If my uncle hadn't come to get us right then, if we'd been a little more adventurous or rebellious, if the man had been a little more convincing or a little less creepy. The truly terrifying thing is that, until my uncle explained, I had been completely ready to go with him. Kay, too. We weren't stupid kids. We got good grades. We knew about stranger danger in theory. But in that moment, the excitement of a boat ride and a secret island overrode everything else. I don't know who that man was or what he wanted, but I know it wasn't good. And I know that if my uncle's truck hadn't pulled up at that exact moment, Kay and I might have disappeared that day. Our photos might have ended up on milk cartons or police bulletins. Just 2 more kids who vanished one summer evening, lured away by the promise of a golden boat and a secret island that never existed. Still get cold sweats thinking about what happened at that cabin in Colorado. It's been 20 years, but I can remember every detail like it was yesterday. I've never shared this story publicly before, but I need to get it off my chest, and maybe someone here has experienced something similar. I was 7 years old when my parents decided we needed a family getaway before winter really set in. My dad, David, had been working overtime for months, and my mom, Sarah, thought it would be good for all of us to disconnect. My sister Emma was 11 and constantly glued to her Nintendo DS, so my parents basically had to drag her away from it. We rented this cabin in the mountains, about 2 hours from Denver. It was the kind of place that looks perfect in photos. Wooden walls, a stone fireplace, snow-capped trees all around. We left early Friday morning. I remember being excited because I got to skip school, which felt like hitting the jackpot when you're 7. The drive took longer than expected because of some snow on the mountain roads. By the time we pulled up to the cabin, it was already getting dark. The temperature was brutal, had to be in the teens. Dad hurried us inside while he unloaded the car. The cabin was freezing until he got the fireplace going. Mom unpacked some sandwiches she'd made for dinner since we were all too tired to cook. After eating, Emma and I checked out our room, we had to share, which she wasn't happy about. 2 twin beds with these super thick quilts that smelled like mothballs. The walls were thin, and there was only one tiny window with old curtains that didn't quite cover it. I fell asleep pretty quick that night, but sometime in the middle of the night, must have been around 2 a.m., I woke up to this sound. At first I thought it was just the house settling, or maybe branches scraping against the roof. But then I realized it was more rhythmic. Footsteps. Someone was walking around outside our cabin. I sat up in bed and listened. The footsteps were slow and deliberate, like whoever it was didn't care if we heard them. They'd stop for a few seconds, then start again. I got out of bed and went to the window, pushing the curtain aside just enough to peek out. It was pitch black outside, and all I could see was our car parked out front and the outline of trees. But the footsteps continued. I got scared and went to wake Emma up. She was annoyed at first, but when she heard the footsteps too, she got quiet. We both watched at the window for what felt like forever. Then Emma grabbed my arm. She'd seen something. A shadow moving between the trees. It was tall, definitely a person, but I couldn't make out any features. The figure stood there for a minute, just watching our cabin, then disappeared back into the trees. We debated whether to wake up our parents, but decided against it. Emma said it was probably just another renter checking out the area. She told me to go back to sleep, but I couldn't. I lay awake for hours, listening, but the footsteps didn't come back. The next morning I was exhausted but tried not to show it. Mom was making pancakes in the kitchen, and the whole cabin smelled amazing. Dad had gone outside to check if we had enough firewood for the weekend. I wolfed down my breakfast and asked if I could go outside with him. Mom reminded me to put on my heavy coat, hat, and gloves because it was cold enough to freeze your fingers off. When I stepped outside, the air hit my face like a slap. It was sunny but freezing. I was about to call for my dad when I noticed he wasn't alone. He was talking to a man I'd never seen before, a short, chubby guy wearing a green veteran's cap. The strange thing was, despite the cold, this guy was sweating, like a lot. His forehead was shiny with it. Dad saw me and waved me over. "Marcus, come meet Patrick. He's staying in another cabin nearby." I walked over, suddenly feeling shy. Patrick smiled at me, but something about it made my stomach feel weird. His teeth were yellow, and his eyes didn't match his smile. "Well, hello there, young man," Patrick said, extending his hand. His palm was wet when I shook it. "How old are you?" 7, I mumbled, looking down at my boots. 7? What a perfect age, Patrick said, and I remember thinking that was a weird thing to say. Who has a perfect age? Dad and Patrick chatted for a few more minutes. Patrick kept saying how he was staying at a cabin about half a mile away with his family. He mentioned having kids around my age, but the way he said it sounded rehearsed, like he was reading lines. Then Dad did something that still makes me angry when I think about it. He invited Patrick in for breakfast, just like that, a complete stranger we'd met in the woods. Inside, Mom was surprised but polite. Emma immediately didn't like him. I could tell by the way she sat as far from him as possible at the breakfast table. Patrick kept wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief, even though the cabin wasn't that warm. During breakfast, Patrick asked a lot of questions about me specifically. Where did I go to school? What sports did I play? Was I strong for my age? Mom answered most of them, probably thinking he was just being friendly, but each question made me more uncomfortable. After breakfast, Emma stayed inside with Mom to help clean up. Dad went to chop more wood, and I went out to explore around the cabin. Patrick said goodbye and left, or at least I thought he had. I was throwing pine cones at a tree trunk, pretending they were grenades, when I slipped on a patch of ice and fell hard. My knee hit a rock, tearing through my jeans and scraping the skin badly. I was sitting there, trying not to cry, when Patrick appeared out of nowhere. "That looks like a nasty cut," he said, kneeling beside me. He was still sweating, even though it couldn't have been more than 15 degrees out. "I have a first aid kit at my cabin. Why don't you come with me, and we'll get that cleaned up?" I hesitated. Mom always said not to go anywhere with strangers, but Patrick wasn't exactly a stranger anymore, right? He'd had breakfast with us. Dad had invited him in, and my knee really hurt. "It's not far," Patrick insisted, "and I've got some cool toys my kids don't play with anymore. You can check them out while I bandage your knee." I should have said no. I should have gone back inside our cabin, but I didn't. I followed Patrick into the woods. We walked for what felt like forever. The trees got thicker, blocking out more and more sunlight. My knee throbbed with each step. After about 25 minutes, way longer than the not far he'd promised, we came to another cabin. It was smaller than ours and looked older, with peeling paint and a sagging porch. "Where's your family?" I asked, suddenly noticing how quiet it was. "Oh, they went into town for supplies," Patrick said quickly. "Come on in." The inside of Patrick's cabin was nothing like ours. It was messy, with clothes thrown over furniture and dirty dishes piled in the sink. There were no toys anywhere that I could see, no sign that children had ever been there. Patrick locked the door behind us. The click of that lock is still one of the scariest sounds I've ever heard. He led me to a kitchen chair and told me to sit while he got the first aid kit. I sat there, heart pounding, suddenly aware that I'd made a terrible mistake. I wanted to run, but where would I go? I didn't know how to get back to our cabin. Patrick returned with a small white box and knelt in front of me. He rolled up my pant leg much higher than he needed to for the scrape on my knee. His hands were clammy against my skin. "You've got good muscle tone for a boy your age," he said, his fingers lingering on my calf. "How much do you weigh?" "I don't know," I whispered, my mouth dry with fear. "I bet you're what, 50 pounds, 55? He dabbed at my scrape with an alcohol wipe, but his eyes kept moving from my knee to my face and back down again. "Do you exercise a lot? Play sports?" Before I could answer, there was a noise from somewhere else in the cabin, a thump like something had fallen. Patrick's face changed instantly. The fake friendliness disappeared, replaced by anger. "Stay right there," he snapped, standing up. "Don't move." He stormed off toward what I guessed was a bedroom. I heard him talking in a harsh whisper, then a woman's voice responding, too quiet for me to make out the words. A moment later, a woman appeared briefly in the hallway. She was thin, so thin her clothes hung off her like they belonged to someone else. Her face was pale, with dark circles under her eyes. When she saw me, her eyes widened in what looked like panic. Patrick grabbed her arm and pushed her back into the room. "I told you to stay in there," he hissed. I heard a door slam, then a lock turning. When Patrick came back, he was smiling again, but it looked forced. "My wife," he explained. "She's not feeling well. Now, where were we?" He finished bandaging my knee, but kept touching my leg in ways that made me feel sick. Then he stood up. "I've got some clothes that might fit you in the other room. Why don't you try them on?" "I don't need clothes," I said, my voice shaking. "I should go home. My parents will worry." "It'll just take a minute," Patrick insisted. "They're real nice clothes, brand new." He gripped my shoulder hard. "Wait here." The second Patrick disappeared into another room, I bolted. I didn't care about the pain in my knee anymore. I just needed to get out of there. I fumbled with the lock on the front door, threw it open, and ran. Behind me, I heard Patrick shout. I ran faster than I ever had in my life, crashing through underbrush, slipping on patches of ice, branches scratching my face. I had no idea if I was going the right way, but I knew I had to put distance between myself and that cabin. "Marcus!" Patrick's voice echoed through the trees. "Come back! I've got toys for you. Don't you want to see the toys?" I kept running, my lungs burning in the cold air. Every few seconds I'd hear him calling, sometimes sounding further away, sometimes closer. At one point, I hid behind a fallen tree, trying to quiet my breathing as I heard him pass nearby. "You're going the wrong way, Marcus," he called out, his voice sickeningly sweet. "You'll get lost out here. There are bears in these woods, you know. Come back to the cabin where it's safe." After what must have been an hour of this terrifying game of hide and seek, I spotted something through the trees, our rental car. I'd somehow circled back to our cabin. I ran the last 100 yards, practically falling through the front door. Dad jumped up from the couch. "Marcus, where the hell have you been? We've been worried sick." I was sobbing so hard I could barely speak. Between gasps, I told them everything. About falling and hurting my knee, about Patrick taking me to his cabin, about the locked door and the strange woman and the way he touched me. Dad's face turned a shade of red I'd never seen before. He grabbed his phone and called the rental company, demanding to know if anyone named Patrick had rented a cabin nearby. They confirmed what I already suspected. The cabin Patrick claimed to be staying in wasn't rented to anyone that weekend. We packed up and left within 20 minutes. Mom held me in the back seat while Dad drove, breaking the speed limit the whole way down the mountain. We stopped at the first police station we found and reported everything. The police went to investigate the cabin I described. They found evidence someone had been there. Food wrappers, some men's clothing, the first aid supplies that had been used on my knee. But Patrick and the woman were gone. They'd vanished completely. The police took DNA samples and fingerprints, but as far as I know, they never found a match. They showed me photos of known sex offenders in the area, but none of them was Patrick. For years afterward, I had nightmares about that man, about what might have happened if I hadn't run when I did, about the woman with the frightened eyes, who she was, if she was okay, if she'd gotten away from him. I'm 27 now, and I've never been back to Colorado. I can't stand the cold anymore. And to this day, I can't trust men who wear veterans' caps or who smile without it reaching their eyes. Sometimes I wonder if Patrick is still out there, still sweating nervously, still looking for children who wander too far from their families. If you're reading this and you have kids, please never let them go anywhere with someone you've just met, no matter how harmless they seem. The monsters in this world don't look like monsters. Sometimes they look like a friendly neighbor who offers to help a hurt child. I still get chills thinking about what happened that night at Sid's house. It's been 15 years, but I can't shake the memory. I've never told this story publicly before, but I need to get it off my chest. This happened when I was 11. Sid was my best friend since second grade. We were inseparable. Her family lived in this nice 2-story house in a developing neighborhood where construction was still ongoing in some parts. Nothing fancy, just a regular suburban home with a small front yard, back patio, and a balcony off the second floor. The kind of place where nothing bad ever happens. That Friday, Sid's parents were heading to some charity event in the city, and they said I could sleep over. I was psyched because sleepovers at Sid's were always better than at my house. Her parents had this huge TV in the living room, and they always stocked the fridge with snacks we weren't allowed to have at my place. Plus, they had Shaggy, this goofy 4-year-old chocolate lab, who was basically a giant teddy bear with a tongue. Sid's mom dropped me off at their place after school, and we hung out while her parents got ready. Before they left, her dad went through the usual routine. Emergency numbers on the fridge, don't answer the door, call if anything happens, blah, blah, blah. I remember thinking it was overkill. We were 11, not babies. They'd only be gone for 6 hours anyway, till around midnight. "Take care of Shaggy," her mom said as they headed out, "and no scary movies." The door clicked shut behind them, and that weird silence settled in. You know, the kind that only happens when adults leave and suddenly you're in charge. We made frozen pizza for dinner, burning the edges because we cranked the oven too high. We laughed it off and ate it anyway while watching cartoons. After that, we played cards in the living room. Sid was teaching me this complicated game her cousin had shown her. Shaggy kept trying to eat the cards, which made us laugh so hard my stomach hurt. Around 10 p.m., we got bored. The house felt too quiet, too normal. That's when Sid got that look in her eyes, the one that always meant trouble. "Want to check out that abandoned lot down the street?" she said, already grabbing her jacket. I knew exactly which lot she meant. About 3 blocks down, there was this empty plot of land surrounded by a crumbling brick wall. Construction had started there maybe a year ago, but then stopped suddenly. Rumors at school said the developer went bankrupt. All that was left was a half-dug foundation, some rusty equipment, and piles of construction materials slowly being reclaimed by weeds. "Won't your parents freak if they find out we left?" I asked, already knowing I'd go along with it anyway. "They won't be back for hours," Sid said with that whatever shrug of hers. "Besides, we're just going down the street." We secured Shaggy inside on his chain. He whined a little as we got ready to leave, like he knew we shouldn't be going. I felt kind of bad, but the excitement of doing something forbidden was too strong. We locked the front door behind us and headed out into the dark. The neighborhood was so quiet. Most of the houses had their lights off already, and the street lights were spaced far apart, creating these pools of yellow with long stretches of darkness between them. The air had that weird autumn smell, like smoke and leaves and cold all mixed together. Our footsteps sounded too loud on the pavement. When we reached the abandoned lot, Sid immediately found the spot where the wall had crumbled enough to climb over. We scrambled across, scraping our hands on the rough bricks. The inside was even darker than the street. The only light came from distant houses and the half-moon overhead. "This is so cool," Sid whispered, though there was nobody around to hear us at normal volume. I guess whispering just felt right in a place like that. The ground was uneven, with random holes and piles of dirt. Dead weeds crunched under our feet, and there were these weird shadows everywhere from the abandoned equipment. The half-dug foundation looked like a giant grave in the moonlight. "Let's play a game," Sid suggested. "We'll sit apart from each other in the dark. First one to get scared and come running loses." It seemed stupid, but I was trying to act brave. "Fine." "How far apart?" "Far enough that we can just barely see each other," she said, already walking away. "Count to 100 before you look for me." I found a spot near some stacked concrete pipes and sat down, counting slowly. When I hit 100, I opened my eyes and looked around. It took a minute, but I finally spotted Sid's silhouette maybe 30 yards away, sitting on what looked like a pile of sand or gravel. The minutes ticked by. The excitement of sneaking out was wearing off, replaced by discomfort. The ground was cold and damp beneath me. Random sounds kept making me jump, probably just animals or the wind moving things around, but in the dark, everything seemed sinister. I was starting to regret the whole adventure when something changed. I saw Sid's silhouette stand up suddenly. Something about the way she moved seemed off. Too quick, too rigid. She started walking toward me, but not casually. She was hurrying, almost jogging, jumping over rocks and debris in her path. I could see her getting scratched by thorns as she passed through a patch of overgrown brambles, but she didn't slow down. When she reached me, I could barely recognize her. Her face was so pale it seemed to glow in the darkness. Her eyes were huge, and she was breathing hard. "We need to go home," she said, her voice flat and strange. "I need to feed Shaggy." "What?" "We already fed him before we left," I said, confused. "I forgot to give him his special food," she insisted, already turning to leave. "Come on, now." I followed her back to the wall, feeling uneasy. Something had scared her, but she wasn't saying what. Once we were outside the fence, she grabbed my arm, so tight it left a bruise I found the next day, and started running. Not jogging, not walking fast, but full-on sprinting. I had no choice but to keep up. We ran all 3 blocks back to her house without stopping once. My lungs were burning, and my legs felt like jelly by the time we reached her front gate. Sid fumbled with the key, her hands shaking so badly she dropped it twice before getting the gate open. Once inside, she went into lockdown mode. She locked the gate behind us, then the front door, then every single window in the house, one by one. She pulled all the curtains shut, even the ones upstairs. Shaggy followed her around in confusion, wagging his tail like he thought this was some new game. I stood in the living room, watching her frantic movements. "Sid, what the hell is going on?" I finally demanded. She stopped, her back to me, hands still gripping the last set of curtains she'd pulled shut. "There was someone else in the lot," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. My stomach dropped. "What do you mean? Like a homeless person or something?" She turned to face me. "No. While we were sitting there, I saw another person, a silhouette, crouching in the bushes near where you were sitting. They were moving closer to you, inch by inch. I don't think they knew I was watching." Ice spread through my veins. "Why didn't you say something right away?" "I was afraid if I shouted they might, I don't know, attack or something. I just wanted to get us out of there without letting them know we'd seen them." We tried to calm down after that, told ourselves it was probably nothing. Maybe just another kid from the neighborhood having the same idea we did. We made hot chocolate and put on a movie, but neither of us was really watching it. Every little sound made us jump. Shaggy seemed to pick up on our anxiety and kept pacing around the house, checking windows and doors like he was on patrol. Around midnight, everything changed. Shaggy suddenly stopped in front of the front door. His whole body went rigid, and the fur on his back stood up. Then he started barking, not his usual friendly, "someone's here" bark, but this deep, aggressive sound I'd never heard him make before. "Maybe it's your parents coming home," I said, though I knew they had a garage remote and wouldn't come through the front door. Sid shook her head. "They'd call first if they were on their way." We looked at each other, both terrified to check what was happening. Finally, Sid whispered, "Let's look from the balcony. We can see the front yard from there without being seen." We crept upstairs, Shaggy still barking wildly below. The upstairs hallway had these sliding doors that opened onto a small balcony overlooking the front yard. We crawled across the floor to reach them, afraid whoever was outside might see us through the glass. Slowly, Sid parted the curtains just enough for us to peek through. What I saw will stay with me forever. There was a person standing on the front lawn, just standing there, still as a statue, facing the house. It was too dark to see much detail, but I could make out matted hair and clothes that looked dirty and torn. They were barefoot despite the cold night. and there was something wrong about the way they stood. Too rigid, arms hanging at unnatural angles. "Oh my God," Sid whispered, her hand clutching mine so tight it hurt. As we watched, frozen in terror, the figure started moving, not away from the house but around it, methodically checking windows and doors. We could hear them testing each one, the sound of hands on glass and doorknobs turning. Suddenly Sid gasped. "The utility room door," she whispered. "I don't think I locked it." The utility room was this attached space on the side of the house where they kept the washer and dryer. It had its own entrance from outside, but also connected directly to the house through an interior door. If that outside door was unlocked... "I have to go lock it," Sid said, already backing away from the window. "Are you crazy?" "We need to call the police," I hissed. "There's no time. If they get in through there, they'll be inside the house in seconds." I knew she was right. We crept downstairs, Shaggy still barking frantically at the front door. Sid grabbed a baseball bat from the closet and handed it to me. "Stay here with Shaggy. If you hear anything weird, take him upstairs and barricade yourself in my parents' room. Their phone is by the bed." Before I could argue, she was moving toward the utility room door at the back of the kitchen. I stood there, bat clutched in my sweaty hands, Shaggy growling beside me. The seconds stretched like hours. Then I heard it. Footsteps on the side path that led to the utility room. Shaggy heard it too and took off running toward the kitchen. I followed, bat raised, heart threatening to burst from my chest. I reached the kitchen just as Sid was sliding the deadbolt into place on the utility room door. Not 2 seconds later, the outside doorknob started to rattle. Someone was trying to get in, the same door Sid had just locked. We backed away from the door, Shaggy standing between us and the entrance, his growl so deep I could feel it in my feet. The rattling continued for what felt like forever, then stopped. Footsteps moved away. "They're checking the other entrances," Sid whispered. We waited, straining to hear where they went next. For maybe 10 minutes, we could hear them moving around the house, testing windows, trying doors. Then silence. Carefully, we made our way back upstairs to the balcony. Peering through the smallest gap in the curtains, we saw the figure had returned to the front lawn. They were just standing there again, perfectly still. Then, slowly, they tilted their head back, looking up, looking directly at our balcony. I don't know if they could see us or not, but it felt like they were staring right into my eyes. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. What happened next was the most disturbing thing I've ever witnessed. The figure lowered themselves to the ground and began crawling, not like someone hurt or unable to walk, but like an animal, moving in jerky, unnatural motions across the lawn. And they were laughing, this high-pitched, maniacal giggle that seemed to float up to where we were hiding. They crawled in circles on the lawn, still giggling, head twisting at impossible angles like they were searching for something. After what felt like an eternity, they stood up again, walked calmly to the front wall, and with surprising agility, climbed over it and disappeared into the night. We didn't move for at least an hour after that. We just sat there, backs against the wall, Shaggy between us, jumping at every sound. Sid's parents came home around 1 a.m., asking why all the lights were on and why we looked so pale. We never told them what happened. The next morning, we found something that made my blood run cold. There were boxes stacked against the outside wall of the yard, like someone had created makeshift stairs to climb over. And beside them, pressed into the soft earth, were barefoot prints. Sid and I never spoke about that night again. Her family moved away the next year, and we gradually lost touch. But sometimes when I'm lying awake at night, I still hear that giggle and wonder who or what was out there on the lawn, and what would have happened if Sid hadn't remembered to lock that utility room door. I still can't walk past abandoned construction sites, and to this day, I triple-check my locks before bed. I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but I need to get it off my chest. I'm still shaking as I type this, and I'm not sure if sharing will help or make things worse. But I need someone to know what's happening to me in case things escalate. I'm a clerk at our county courthouse. It's a small building in a small town where everyone pretty much knows everyone. I've been working here for just over 3 years, and until last month, I loved my job. The pay isn't amazing, but the benefits are decent, and I enjoyed helping people navigate the often confusing legal system. That all changed on Friday, February 18th, 2022. I was covering the records desk that afternoon, which isn't my usual station, but we were short-staffed. It was around 4:15 p.m., and I was counting down the minutes until the weekend. Then Joe walked in. That's not his real name, obviously, but that's what I'll call him here. Joe is what we call a regular, someone who comes in frequently for the same case. He's been coming to the courthouse almost weekly for about 6 months now, always requesting documents related to his family court case. I never paid much attention to him before. He was just another face, another case number. That Friday, he approached my desk wearing this weird sock monkey hat. It's February, so a hat isn't unusual, but this one stood out. Brown with a red mouth and those button eyes. The kind of thing that should be cute, but somehow wasn't on him. I remember noticing his eyes when he handed me his request form. They were intense, like he was looking through me instead of at me. While I was pulling his documents, my coworker Lynn came over to confirm our plans after work. "So we still on for Plato's Closet after this?" she asked. I nodded and mentioned I'd been wanting to check out their winter clearance. Joe was still standing there waiting for his papers, but I didn't think anything of mentioning our plans. Why would I? He was just another courthouse visitor. I finished helping Joe around 4:30 p.m. He thanked me, smiled in a way that didn't reach his eyes, and left. 20 minutes later, Lynn and I clocked out and headed to Plato's Closet, this second-hand clothing store about 10 minutes from the courthouse. We'd been browsing for maybe 15 minutes when the door chimed. I glanced up out of habit, and my blood ran cold. Joe walked in, still wearing that stupid sock monkey hat. At first I tried to convince myself it was a coincidence. Small town, limited shopping options, right? But then I saw how he was moving through the store. He wasn't browsing. He was searching. His eyes scanned each aisle methodically, his hands occasionally touching clothes as if to appear like a normal shopper. But it was obvious he wasn't interested in the merchandise. I grabbed Lynn's arm so hard she winced. "That guy from the courthouse is here," I whispered, pulling her behind a circular rack of coats. "Which guy?" Lynn asked, peeking through the clothes. "The one with the monkey hat. He was at my desk right when we were talking about coming here." We watched him circle the store, getting closer to our hiding spot with each pass. My heart was hammering so hard I was sure he could hear it. When he got within a few feet of us, I could see sweat beading on his forehead, despite the store being cold. His movements were too deliberate, too focused. This wasn't shopping. This was hunting. Lynn suggested we split up to confuse him, but I couldn't move. My legs felt like they were filled with concrete. We stayed hidden for another 20 minutes, watching him patrol the store. Eventually, the teenage cashier announced they were closing in 10 minutes, and Joe finally left, empty-handed. We waited another 5 minutes before darting to my car, checking the parking lot frantically to make sure he was gone. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying the scene in my head, wondering if I was overreacting. Maybe it was just a weird coincidence, but deep down, I knew better. The way he searched that store, he was looking for me. Monday morning, I went to the police station before work. The officer who took my report was sympathetic, but not particularly concerned. Without any threats or direct contact, there's not much we can do, he explained. But we'll keep an eye out, and you should document any further incidents. I felt slightly better after filing the report. I told my supervisor what happened, and she was supportive, saying I could work in the back office for a while if I wanted. But I didn't want to disrupt the whole office or seem dramatic, so I declined. Big mistake. Wednesday came, and at 4:45 p.m., 15 minutes before closing, Joe appeared at the courthouse again. I was back at my usual station in the family court division, and I literally felt my stomach drop when I saw him walk in. He wasn't wearing the monkey hat this time, but I'd recognize his hunched posture anywhere. He approached the filing counter, not my desk, thankfully, and took an eternity completing simple paperwork. I texted Lynn under my desk, "He's here again, 15 min before closing." She immediately called courthouse security, who sent an officer to casually patrol our area. Joe kept glancing up from his paperwork, scanning the room. His eyes landed on me once, and he smiled that same empty smile. I pretended to be busy with my computer, but I could feel his gaze burning into me. He stayed until exactly 5 p.m., when security announced we were closing. Even then, he lingered by the door, only leaving when directly asked to by the security officer. That night, I drove home taking random turns, constantly checking my rearview mirror. I set chairs against all my doors and barely slept. Thursday was worse. Again, Joe showed up right before closing. This time, he went straight to the public access computer in the corner of the room, the one with the best view of the entire office. He didn't even pretend to look up case information. He just sat there, staring at the blank screen, occasionally typing something only to delete it. My supervisor had implemented a safety plan after Wednesday's incident. When Joe arrived, she texted both courthouse security and the local police officer who had taken my report. Within minutes, 2 officers and a security guard approached Joe at the computer. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I could see Joe's face. He didn't look scared or even surprised. He looked prepared, like he'd been expecting this confrontation and had rehearsed for it. Later, the police officer came over and told me what Joe had said. He admitted being at Plato's Closet, but claimed he was shopping for his daughters. When asked where his daughters were during his shopping trip, he got flustered and said they were with their mother. The officer then asked why he didn't purchase anything, and Joe said he couldn't find the right sizes. The most chilling part? When the officer mentioned the coincidence of him being at the same store I had mentioned going to, Joe immediately asked, "Did she call you?" Then he suggested his ex-wife was setting him up, trying to make him look bad. He hadn't even been told why they were questioning him yet. Joe denied hearing our conversation about Plato's Closet and insisted he had left the courthouse earlier than I remembered. But Lynn and I both knew exactly when he was there. We both remembered helping him. There's even security footage showing him at my desk when Lynn and I were talking about our plans. The officer told me privately that they'd looked into Joe's background. His roommate and his roommate's girlfriend had both filed restraining orders against him for harassment in the past year. In both cases, Joe had shown up at places they mentioned going, followed them home, and sent multiple unwanted messages. Sound familiar? Despite all this, The police said there wasn't much they could do. Joe had legitimate reasons to be at the courthouse as a member of the public with an ongoing case. He hadn't directly threatened me or explicitly followed me outside of Plato's closet, which they could still argue was coincidental. I felt completely helpless. I ordered a home security system that same night. I signed up for self-defense classes. I bought mace and started researching handguns, something I never thought I'd need. I changed my routine, took different routes to work, even considered dyeing my hair. But none of it makes me feel safe, because Joe still comes to the courthouse, always 15 minutes before closing, always lingering until security makes him leave. He doesn't approach me anymore, but he watches. Sometimes he brings documents to file. Sometimes he uses the public computer, but he's always there, waiting. Last week I saw his car parked 2 blocks from my apartment. I can't prove he was looking for me. Maybe he was visiting someone else in the building, but I know. I just know. The most frustrating part is how helpless I feel despite doing everything right. I reported it to the police. I told my workplace. I implemented safety measures. But the system can't protect me because technically he hasn't done anything illegal yet. It's like everyone's waiting for him to actually hurt me before they can help. Every day I go to work knowing he might be there. Every night I go home wondering if this is the night he decides to escalate. I jump at every noise. I've stopped going anywhere alone. I spend my weekends inside with the curtains drawn. Yesterday, I found a small stuffed sock monkey on my car windshield when I left work. No note, no explanation. Just sitting there staring at me with those button eyes, identical to the hat he was wearing that first day. I didn't touch it. I used a stick to knock it off my car and drove straight to the police station. The officer took the toy as evidence but said the same thing again. There's no direct threat. We can't prove it was him. But I know it was, and I know what it means. He's telling me he remembers that day too. He's telling me he's watching. He's telling me he can get to my car, to my things, maybe to me. I'm writing this from my parents' house 2 towns over. I've called in sick to work for 3 days now. I can't go back there, but I also can't quit my job. I need the income, the health insurance. I don't know what to do anymore. I feel like I'm waiting for something terrible to happen, just so someone will finally believe me, just so someone will finally help me. The police say they need evidence. They need him to make an explicit threat. They need him to cross a line that's clearer than the ones he's already crossed. But by then, will it be too late? I look out my parents' window now, and I swear I just saw a car that looks like his drive-by slowly. A car that has no reason to be in this quiet neighborhood, in this different town. If you're reading this and have been through something similar, please tell me what you did. How did you make it stop? How did you make people believe you? And if you're a woman who thinks, this would never happen to me, I thought that too. I was just doing my job. I was just going shopping after work. I didn't do anything to ask for this or lead him on. I barely even noticed him before that day. Now I notice everything, every sound, every shadow, every car that drives by twice. I'm sitting here in my childhood bedroom, under blankets that should make me feel safe, and all I can think is, when I go back to work on Monday, will he be waiting? And why won't anyone help me until it's too late? I don't usually talk about this, but it's been weighing on me lately. 7 years ago, when I was 14, something happened that completely changed how I see the world. Even now, living alone in Australia at 21, I can't shake the anxiety it caused. It was Halloween 2016 in Fiji. My family had moved there about 3 years earlier when Dad got a job with an international company. I was excited because my school was hosting this big Halloween party, my first real one since moving to Fiji. Most kids my age were going, and I'd spent weeks planning my zombie surfer costume. My parents and my sister Mia, she was 12 then, were supposed to go to our family friend's place, the Thompsons, for their annual Halloween thing. Dad dropped me off at school around 6 p.m. I remember being so pumped about hanging out with my friends without parents hovering around. The party was going great. We were playing these cheesy Halloween games and stuffing our faces with candy. Around 8:30 p.m., my phone started blowing up. My dad was calling, which was weird because he wasn't supposed to pick me up until 10. When I answered, he sounded tense. "Lucas, I'm coming to get you right now. The house alarm went off." My stomach dropped immediately. Our house was empty. Everyone was out. Dad explained that he'd gotten an alert on his phone from our security system. He was already in the car, having left Mom and Mia at the Thompsons. "But what about the party?" I whined, not fully understanding the situation. "Now, Lucas," was all he said before hanging up. I told my friends something came up and waited by the school entrance. Dad pulled up about 15 minutes later, looking stressed. As I got in, he explained that the alarm company had called saying multiple motion sensors were triggered inside our house. He'd already called our security company, and 3 guards were meeting us there. But here's the thing. Instead of taking me home with him, he was dropping Mom and Mia off to check the house while he took me somewhere safe. That's when I realized this might be serious. We pulled up to our house, and I saw Mom and Mia waiting in the Thompsons' car parked across the street. Dad told me to stay put while he went to talk to them. I watched through the window as they had a quick, intense conversation. Mom seemed worried, but determined. Dad seemed reluctant. 3 security guards arrived in their company SUV just then. Dad walked back to our car. "Change of plans. You're coming with me to the Wilsons' place while your mom and the guards check the house." "What? Why can't we all just wait?" "Because your mom thinks it's better if someone familiar is there with the guards. She knows where everything is supposed to be." "But no arguments, Lucas. Mia's coming with us." I watched as my sister got out of the Thompsons' car and joined us. Mom approached our window. "It's probably nothing," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just a system malfunction, or maybe the cat from next door somehow got in. I'll call when it's clear." I'll never forget watching her walk toward our house with those 3 guards, their flashlights cutting through the dark. Dad drove us to the Wilsons, who lived about 5 minutes away. The entire time, he kept checking his phone, waiting for Mom's call. About 20 minutes later, Dad's phone rang. His face relaxed as he answered, but then quickly tensed again. He stepped outside to talk. When he came back, he told us to stay put and that he had to go home immediately. Later, I learned what happened at our house that night. Mom and the guards had entered cautiously. They'd gone room by room, turning on lights, checking closets, looking under beds, the whole drill. Everything seemed normal. No signs of forced entry, nothing missing that she could tell. The alarm had stopped by then. After the inside sweep, Mom had started opening up the windows and the gates that led to our balcony. Our house in Fiji had this large wraparound balcony on the 2nd floor with several access points that we kept locked. As she inserted the key into one of the balcony gates, she noticed something odd. A pair of flip-flops on the balcony floor that didn't belong to us. Looking closer, she spotted 2 pairs of legs hidden under this garden sofa we had pushed against the wall. Mom said she just froze for a second, not believing what she was seeing. Then she screamed. backing away while yelling for the guards who were checking other parts of the house. The intruders knew they'd been caught. They immediately jumped up and leaped off our balcony into the garden below, a drop of about 15 feet. One guard managed to grab onto one of the guys, but the second intruder jumped on the guard's back, and in the confusion, both intruders broke free and ran into the forest behind our property. The police arrived within minutes. Our house was literally only 100 meters from the police station. But the men were gone. Left behind were the flip-flops, some socks they'd apparently been using as makeshift gloves, and 2 kitchen knives they must have taken from our house. The most disturbing thing? They defecated in our garden. The police said this was a territorial marking, something some criminals do to show dominance or leave their signature. That knowledge made me sick to my stomach. When Dad brought us home later that night, the police were still there taking statements. They'd set up a perimeter and were searching the nearby area with flashlights. Mom looked shaken, but was trying to act normal for our sake. I couldn't sleep at all that night. I kept thinking about what might have happened if we'd all been home, or if Mom had been alone when she found them. What were they planning to do with those knives? The thought still makes my skin crawl. For the next few days, we had a security guard stationed outside our house. Dad installed more lights, better locks, and even talked about getting a dog. I started checking under my bed every night before sleeping, a habit I still haven't broken. Then, about 2 weeks after the incident, Mom was pulling out of our driveway to take Mia to school when she saw 2 men watching our house from across the street. She said one was wearing a hat similar to one we'd found in our yard that the police had taken as evidence, and the other had brand new flip-flops. When they saw her looking, they didn't run or act suspicious. They just stared back, almost like they wanted her to see them. Mom immediately drove back into the garage, locked the doors, and called the police. By the time officers arrived, the men were gone. The police increased patrols in our area, but we never saw those specific men again, at least not that we could identify. During the investigation, we learned how the intruders had gotten onto our balcony. Behind our house was this wooden structure with poles and a plank that the previous tenants had built. Dad had asked our landlord multiple times to remove it because it was a security risk, but he never did. The intruders had used it as a ladder to climb up to our balcony. Though I wasn't physically there when it all went down, the incident changed me. We moved to a different house in Fiji about a month later, one with better security and a gated community. But I never felt safe there again. Every noise at night would wake me up. I developed this complex checking ritual before bed. Doors locked, windows secured, closets empty, nothing under the bed. My parents noticed and got me into therapy, which helped a bit, but some fears just stick with you. Now I'm 21 and studying in Australia. Living alone has been a challenge. My apartment has 3 locks on the door. The standard one, a deadbolt I installed myself, and a chain lock. I have motion sensor lights in every room and a security camera system that sends alerts to my phone. The worst part is that I've actually locked myself out of my own apartment 5 times in the past year because of my obsessive checking. I'll step out to take out the trash and the door will automatically lock behind me, or I'll double-check the locks so many times that I somehow end up locking myself out. My roommate from last semester moved out because my security rituals were too much. He couldn't deal with me waking up at 3 a.m. to check the locks again, or freaking out when he left a window cracked open. I know my fear isn't entirely rational anymore. Those men were probably long-term burglars who'd been watching our house and knew our routines. They probably picked Halloween night thinking everyone would be out. They weren't after us specifically. We were just a target of opportunity. But knowing that doesn't help at 2 a.m. when I hear a floorboard creak or when someone walks behind me too closely on a dark street. I still can't shake the image of those legs hiding under our sofa or the thought of what might have happened if Mom hadn't noticed them. Sometimes I wonder if those men are still out there, breaking into other people's homes. I wonder if they remember us or if we were just one house among many. I wonder if they know how much they changed my life that night. I don't have any dramatic conclusion to this story. No confrontation, no resolution, no closure. Just a 14-year-old kid whose sense of safety was shattered, and a 21-year-old man who still sleeps with the lights on sometimes. Last week, my landlord called to say he was sending someone to fix my bathroom sink. I took the day off work and waited by the door with a baseball bat until the maintenance guy arrived. He looked at me like I was crazy. Maybe I am a little crazy now, or maybe I just understand something that most people are fortunate enough not to know, that safety is an illusion, and sometimes there really are monsters hiding under the furniture, waiting for you to turn your back. I'm still shaking as I write this. I keep thinking about how differently things could have gone if I'd made just one wrong decision. It's been 3 months since this happened, but I can't stop thinking about it. Maybe writing it all down will help. Last September, I moved to Los Angeles to start law school. It was a huge change from my small hometown in Missouri, where everybody knows everybody. LA is massive, overwhelming, and honestly terrifying when you first arrive. I'm 24, but I felt like a lost kid those first few weeks. One thing that made the move less scary was knowing my half-sister Maya lived somewhere in the city. We had never met in person because of some serious family drama that happened before I was born. My dad left Maya's mom for my mom when Maya was just a baby. Yeah, I know. Classic drama. The families completely separated, and as we grew up, any attempts at connecting were shut down by the adults. I had found Maya on Instagram a few years ago, but never reached out. It felt too weird, you know? Like, hey, I'm the daughter of the man who abandoned you. Let's be friends. I just couldn't do it. But I followed her account and occasionally looked at her photos. She seemed cool, artsy type, lots of friends, studying film at UCLA. She looked a lot like me too, which was wild to see. When I got accepted to law school in LA, I thought about contacting her a bunch of times. I even drafted messages but never sent them. I guess I was scared of rejection or opening old wounds. So there I was, drowning in first-year law school work, barely sleeping, living off coffee and ramen, when I got a Facebook notification. A friend request from Maya Rodriguez. My heart literally stopped for a second when I saw her name. I clicked on the profile immediately. The photos matched the ones I'd seen on Instagram. She had about 600 friends, posts going back years, tagged photos with other people. Everything looked totally normal and legitimate. She even had photos with people wearing UCLA shirts, which matched what I knew about her. I accepted the request right away, and within minutes I got a message from her. Olivia, I can't believe you're in LA now. I saw you tagged in a post about the new law school class. This is so weird. I've been wanting to reach out to you for years, but never knew how. Would love to finally meet my little sister. I stared at that message for like an hour. It felt surreal. I typed and deleted about 20 different responses before finally sending something like, "Hey, this is so crazy. I've wanted to reach out too, but wasn't sure how. Would definitely love to meet up." We messaged back and forth for a couple of days. She was friendly, asked about my classes, told me about her film projects. It all felt so normal, like we were just regular sisters catching up. She never brought up our dad or any family drama, which I was grateful for. That seemed like heavy stuff for messages. Then on a Thursday night, she sent me this. Hey, so me and my friends are having a dinner party tomorrow night at Elysian Park. It's kind of our monthly tradition. Would love for you to come. We could finally meet, and you can get to know some cool people in LA too. We usually start around 8:30. I remember feeling this weird mix of excitement and anxiety. Meeting my half-sister for the first time was a big deal on its own. But meeting her and all her friends at once, at a park, at night, it felt overwhelming. Like, what if we didn't click? What if it was awkward? What if her friends thought I was boring? Law students aren't exactly known for being the life of the party. I made up an excuse about having to study for an upcoming test and suggested we meet for coffee first, just the two of us. She seemed disappointed but said she understood and that we'd find another time. The conversation kind of fizzled after that. She'd occasionally like my posts but stopped messaging me. I felt bad, like maybe I'd blown my chance at connecting with her. But law school was intense, and I got sucked into the vortex of cases and briefs and forgot about it for a while. About 2 weeks later, I was procrastinating on a civil procedure assignment and found myself Googling random stuff. For some reason, I remembered the park Maya had mentioned and realized I didn't know where it was. So I Googled Elysian Park, Los Angeles. The park itself looked nice in the photos, but as I scrolled through the search results, I noticed news articles, a lot of them. Shooting at Elysian Park, body found in Elysian Park. Gang activity increases near Elysian Park. My stomach dropped. I kept researching, clicking through news sites and community forums. Apparently, certain sections of the park, especially after dark, were known gang territories. There had been multiple violent crimes there in the past year alone. No one in their right mind would have a monthly dinner party tradition there, especially not at 8:30 p.m. I felt sick. Something was very wrong. I went back to Maya's Facebook profile and started looking more carefully. The posts were all pretty generic. Lots of memes, check-ins at popular places, group photos where she was tagged. But there weren't many personal comments or interactions that seemed genuine. It suddenly felt manufactured. I went to her Instagram that I'd been following for years and compared the photos. They were the same person, definitely, but the Facebook account had mostly used photos that were already public on Instagram. There were hardly any unique photos on the Facebook profile. Panic started building in my chest. I tried to think clearly. If this wasn't really Maya, then who was I talking to? And why would they invite me to a dangerous part of LA at night? I decided I needed to find the real Maya somehow. I remembered she was studying film at UCLA, so I searched for film student groups and forums. I posted in a UCLA subreddit, asking if anyone knew Maya Rodriguez from the film department. I got a response from someone who said they had classes with her. After some back and forth to verify they actually knew her, I asked specific questions about things I'd seen on her Instagram. I explained the situation. This person, Alicia, was understandably freaked out and offered to help. She said she could arrange for us to meet at her apartment where Maya could come too. I was terrified waiting for that meeting. What if this was another trap? What if Alicia was working with whoever made the fake profile? It sounds paranoid now, but I was seriously scared. I told my roommate exactly where I was going and asked her to call the police if she didn't hear from me by a certain time. When I arrived at Alicia's apartment near UCLA, I was so nervous I thought I might throw up. Alicia let me in, and there, sitting on the couch, was Maya, my sister. She looked just like her photos, but different too, more real, more alive. When our eyes met, we both just froze. I don't remember who moved first, but suddenly we were hugging and both crying. It was overwhelming. She looked so much like me, same eyes, same smile. It was like looking at a version of myself that had grown up differently. After we calmed down, I explained about the Facebook messages. Maya's face changed completely. She pulled out her phone and showed me. She hadn't used Facebook in years. Her last post was from high school. Someone had been impersonating her online. "This has happened before," she said, her voice shaking a little. "Someone made a fake Instagram of me last year and tried to scam money from people. But this is so much worse." We searched for the profile that had messaged me, but it was gone, completely deleted. No trace of it anywhere. Maya and I spent hours talking that night about our dad, our childhoods, our lives. It was strange and beautiful and healing in ways I hadn't expected. We're still building our relationship, figuring out what it means to be sisters who didn't grow up together. But I can't stop thinking about what would have happened if I'd gone to that park that night. Who was pretending to be Maya? What were they planning to do to me? Rob me? Kidnap me? Worse? I filed a police report, but they basically said without the profile or any real evidence, there's not much they can do. I check my locks twice now before going to bed. I carry pepper spray everywhere. I'm paranoid about every new person I meet. I keep wondering if whoever it was might try again with a different approach. The scariest part? I still don't know who it was or why they targeted me specifically. Did they know Maya was my half-sister? Did they somehow know I was looking for her? Was it random? I've gone over every possibility in my head 1,000 times and still have no answers. Maya thinks it might be someone who knows her, who might have heard her talk about having a half-sister at some point. The thought that someone in her circle might be dangerous makes both of us uneasy. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about what would have happened if I'd said yes to that invitation. Would I have disappeared that night? Would anyone have known where to look for me? Would I have become just another missing person statistic in LA? I got lucky. My social anxiety about meeting a bunch of new people potentially saved my life. But someone out there tried to lure me to a dangerous place at night by exploiting my desire to connect with my sister. And they're still out there. So if you're ever in a situation where something feels off, listen to that feeling. And if someone you've never met invites you somewhere, especially at night, please do your research. It might just save your life like it saved mine. I still haven't told my parents about any of this. They don't even know I've met Maya. Some family wounds are still too fresh to reopen. But Maya and I meet for coffee every weekend now. We're making up for lost time, building a relationship neither of us thought we'd ever have. But I'll never shake the knowledge that our reunion almost never happened, that instead of finding my sister, I nearly walked straight into what could have been a trap set by someone who went to considerable lengths to earn my trust and lure me to a dangerous place. I'm writing this as a warning. Be careful who you trust online, even when they seem legitimate, even when they know details about your life, even when they look exactly like someone you're looking for.